I'm just taking this off mute right now. And do you want to call the meeting to order? And
Yes, let's call the meeting to order at, well, we can do 5:59 p.m.
yes,
Get going. Wonder.
Yes, Lisa was just appointed for another term by city council, so go ahead and swear her in, okay? Lisa, can you stand? And raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Lisa Manifold,
I, Lisa Manifold,
do solemnly declare and affirm
do solemnly declare and affirm
that I will support and uphold
that I will support and uphold
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Colorado,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Colorado,
and the ordinances of the city of Idaho Springs,
and the ordinances of the city of Idaho Springs,
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
and that I will faithfully perform the duties
of Historic Preservation Review Commission board member
of Historic Preservation Review Commission board member
for the city of Idaho Springs,
for the city of Idaho Springs,
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited. We have a lot.
Here's a real pen.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know that. We have a lot, even though this is a short agenda, we have a lot on this meeting. So if we could do a roll call, please, Ms. Wonder?
Chair Lisa Manifold,
Here.
Rachel Turry,
Here.
Shannon Glazer, Patty Tyler,
Here.
Madison Wolf,
Here.
Michael Davenport. Thank you.
And Madison, since Mike isn't here, you'd be our first voting member. Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion of approval for the minutes from January 17th, 2023. And did everyone get a copy of the minutes?
Because the agenda says December.
Oh, yeah, may I please ask for a motion to modify the minutes from the minutes of December 13th to the minutes of January 17th, 2023? So motion,
Yeah, I a motion to approve the minutes January 17th.
have a second.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Please raise your right hand. All opposed? Excellent, thank you. All right, now, do I have an approval for the minutes of January 17th for 2023? Do we have any concerns? If you need another minute, please take one.
I wasn't at this meeting. It's correct.
Okay, so I vote to approve the minutes.
A second, thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes? Raise your hand. Opposed? I'm going to abstain. Excellent. Are there any public comments with Wonder on anything that is not on our new business?
I don't think, nobody signed up for public comments. Do we have anybody online?
no, ma'am.
Okay. So having none, no public comments, I can't even speak tonight. No public comments. Are there any conflicts of interest for anything that's on our new business? Excellent. Then let's move right into new business.
Madam Chair, I'd like to bring Jonah, if you'd like to join us at the table. Mr. Hearn is
Full chair forward.
okay, owner of the Club Hotel, which has been renovating for the last 2 years, a little while. And it's been a complicated project, as we all know that, or we may not, but just a little bit background on the building. It was condemned during the COVID-19 pandemic because of unsafe living conditions. And so after that, Mr. Hearn purchased property and they've been restoring it to be a boutique hotel in Idaho Springs. This project is in a historic building. It's on the National Register as a part of the historic district in downtown Idaho Springs. So it's one of our most significant historic resources in town. And it's important to think about that. There have been, hi, how are you? Give you a second to get all settled here before we continue.
Wonder if it's 6:03.
The agenda is the wrong minutes here, the correct minutes from Jimmy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In any renovation project, there's always challenges that come up that are unforeseen. And your team has definitely had some of those happen, and they've definitely encountered some interesting things. And I think I'll let you tell your own story, but basically why Mr. Hearn is here tonight is to discuss where his project stands right now and some future changes that might occur on the property. Now, if you were here for the last time Mr. Hearn came to Hprc, he was required to have a COA because there was significant change to the facade of the building. That will be required moving forward if there's other facade changes. And of course, the building department and all of those departments might be involved in future work if there's engineering changes. This is not an opportunity for you to take action tonight. This is an opportunity for Mr. Hearn to talk to you in the spirit of the agreement he made with HPRC the last time he was here. And so we just wanted to let him have a chance to update on the project and where it's going and kind of tell us a little bit about what it's going to take for you to get open.
Certain. And just for the record, because it's a public meeting, the property wasn't condemned, it was deemed unsafe.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I apologize.
Because I do have to carry insurance and I have letters and all that.
That's correct. I apologize. It's the wrong word.
No problem at all. So yeah, so basically, we bought the property back in March of 2021. Did a pretty intensive clean out and demo process on the interior. Did get approval from HPRC to strip off the log siding around the original house, the original siding that was on the house back in 1882. And essentially at that point got approval to go ahead with our project of restoring the Club Hotel to the era of like 1900 when it was kind of at its prime. We have been going through that work through all of 2022. I have had some contractor issues, and obviously when I was here last time, I had that contractor with me. In October, we ran into some financial dispute with him because he was not living up to the contract that he had signed. At that point, on the 31st, he decided he was going to stop work and therefore breach our contract, and therefore we are no longer working with him. Now he has created a lot of angst and delays in the project, and the fact that he has chosen to file a lawsuit against us, and we are going to work through that. Fortunately, we have very strong support from our lenders, which includes CCED and private money. And then also we were able to obtain another local commercial contractor to help support us on the project and work within the budget that we had remaining. Unfortunately, AJ did kind of abscond with quite a bit of materials and money when he did leave. So it has been a little bit of a challenge over the last, I guess, 3 months now of working to obtain additional funding, financing in order to go forward. It looks like we have got that in. I was signing some of the papers today and expect to sign some more papers tomorrow to be able to get that additional funding so that we'll be able to finish, the estimated timeline here by May. We only have about 2 to 3 months worth of work left on the property. There's been a lot of work that has been done on the interior, all the rough plumbing, electrical work, all that stuff is done. Probably majority of the drywall has already been completed. Really all that's left is getting final sign-offs from the state on the fire suppression system, getting the rest of the drywall finished up, getting the floors done, and then installing toilets and sinks and fixtures and all that other good stuff. So, and then obviously doing the rest of the exterior work. We do have the exterior work pretty much done along the original guest house, along to the back alley. We still have to basically, what we're going to be doing right out of the gate here when we start back up first week of March is kind of finishing the siding around the logs. Now, so this brings us to the point of the lobby. So on 16th Street is the main entrance. When you walk into the front door, basically, you go to the left and that's the lobby. That is surrounded by a log structure. And that's the deteriorated logs that we knew were deteriorated when we bought the property. We knew those were going to be an issue. The challenge, of course, is at the time we were hoping to be able to kind of pull out the worst of the logs, set it back down on a raised concrete. And that's what we had approved by the HPRC back in 2021. Since obviously the 2 years that we've been delayed on this project, what we've seen is basically the deterioration of the logs are exceeding beyond just the bottom 2 rows. That corner piece essentially is about 8 rows up. Those logs are in their core when we kind of coat them and stake them. From the inside, those are deteriorating as well. So even if they don't outwardly show a lot of signs of deterioration, if we just cover them up, we expect that was going to continue to deteriorate in sag and not provide the support that is needed. So at this point, we have to go forward with the belief that, we have to, replace that wall. Now, my contractor currently is working on two plans here. One is essentially when you look at the windows that are there on the 16th Street side, on the right-hand side of those windows, he can essentially cut those logs, because that's where kind of like the sag begins and carries on to the corner. He can cut those logs, put in a support structure right up against the logs that are there, and then build a framed wall all the way around the corner into the house. And that framed wall is going to be supported on, already put in a foundation that's there. That was already in the plan, so there's really no change in that aspect. All we're talking about here is essentially replacing that section of the logs with a frame structure that still will take the siding and still look identical to the rest of the property under the siding as well. It's just framed there, whereas everywhere else is going to be logs. And then reinstall the windows and reinstall everything. So in essence, from the outward appearance, it will look exactly the same as what's already been approved. The other option, obviously, is finding, he's already found a supplier that can essentially custom manufacture those logs, because those logs are somewhat unique in the fact that a normal log cabin you see in the woods is just round 8-inch round logs that you slap together with little notches to fit everything together. These logs are round on the front and then 3 sides squared off. So you have to mill those specifically for this particular purpose in order to fit that in. And that would require, once again, removing the logs on the north side of that structure and the entire west side of that structure to the corner. Now, the disassembly and reassembly of that is not something that's typical in log construction. Usually you have to kind of take everything down and build it back up from the base. So theoretically, you may have to take logs that are already in place, take them apart, put everything back together with new. What he's saying is the cost behind that is going to be at a minimum double of what it would take to do the framing. The framing, we're estimating at about $35,000 is what he has as an estimate for doing the frame job as I described. So that is kind of the situation we're in, along with dealing with the contractor issues and things like that, and having to get additional funding in order to finish this. I'm just kind of putting forward and get your thoughts and ideas and stuff like that when it comes to dealing with this particular situation.
Madam Chair, the reason this is coming before Hprc is because in the COA, the logs that were to be removed, the project has changed. There are standards in the National Park Service guidelines that cover the situation that Mr. Hearn is encountering here. And that's why we wanted to come and have it discussed at Hprc, because you may need to see an application for this project. Mr. Hearn hasn't submitted drawings or anything for that project yet. And so I think you still need to work with your contractor and make sure you know what you're doing. But what I wanted to do, especially in my new role as interim community development project, is make sure that we don't hold him up on this project, to make sure that he's got the resources and tools that he needs. And one of the things that I know Hprc has been trying to do is build contextual processes for people to go through, so it's easy to understand these things. And so if you guys have questions for Mr. Hearn, that's an okay thing, but remember, you may have a hearing on this item. And so what's important right now is just the update on the house. Anything that is specific to the construction or anything like that would probably be better to leave for the hearing. So we just wanted to make sure you guys had an update essentially on what you're doing.
Will the exterior still look the same as originally intended regardless of what's behind the facade?
Yes, sir.
Okay, 'cause that's the main thing the Park Service is concerned about is what does the outside look like?
And you plan to reuse the windows that are on that 16th
Yes,
Street entrance,
we
like
would
there's no
absolutely.
replacements? Okay. When you do come before us, because this, I think this falls under a COA too, are you going to show us both plans? Is that your plan or?
We would just have to bring, because the log structure is what it is. There's really not any drawings or anything like that.
There is a
that would
sag.
be- Yeah,
I've seen this thing.
The other thing is, see, we're gonna have to have building department review just because there might potentially be structural changes to the building.
Mhm.
So that review is also might dictate what they choose to do as well. So
How long does that usually take if we're looking at a time frame so that, you know, we can continue on this time?
Contractually, Safe Build has 10 business days to review plans, to either say, okay, they're good, or to say, nope, we want this, nope, we want to see this. So it's pretty variable, but
we
starting.
have all our ducks in a row. Okay.
and just so you know too, I don't think you were there for that one, but we did have a conversation with the Safe Build guys and talk through kind of like some of the things we were, worried about here. And because there's nothing dealing with kind of the safety as far as fire and electrical, water, no MEP type work that's in there. Because at the end of the day, it was bog, so we weren't going to put anything in there. Because there's nothing there, there's really, it's a fairly easy review for them. It just has to be structurally sound, which we plan on making sure we draw something up structurally sound. But also when we worry about timeline and things like that, because you can still get safe access out to evacuate or any of those type of things. If it does have some delay for review or anything like that, we already have essentially a plan in place to where we can just put a temporary wall on the interior and we can still open and function with a CO from the city. And Safe Build will sign off on it as it is with a temporary wall there, and then we can finish the work. We can take the rest of the summer to deal with it. But we can have a CO and everything like that signed off.
Anybody else? Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming before us and giving us an update. This is, what we talked about the last time you were here. This is something that's really important to us, is that if things go awry, come talk to us.
Right. And then I just have one more question for the council too is, since we are in a legal situation with our former contractor, in part of the process of discovery and things like that we're working on dealing with, what is he liable for? What are the issues that we're facing with him? When it comes to the siding that is currently going up that we had, obviously our extended conversation about getting approval and everything like that, I just need to get a sense from the committee. Essentially, if for any reason I have to take that siding off due to repairs or defects or anything like that. So if I have to go through the process of taking that siding off, that is probably going to fall under a conversation with Hprc and probably CCO.
Would you replace it with same product or
Well,
different product?
So the thing is that if it was just a defect issue with it, or whatever that is, if we had to take it down, we'd probably lose quite a bit of it. So if it was putting up the same product, but also I found a cedar product that essentially replicates the siding well, not perfectly. It's basically 3/4 inch chamfer versus a full inch chamfer that was on the property before, but it's what I would consider a very minor detail when it comes to what it looks like overall. So I have found a product here that's local that we would be able to put up there. If I just need to get kind of direction from the committee on if I had to pull that down and you were to review that, would you look to kind of say you would prefer the original type siding or something more
I would recommend the board does not directly weigh in on that, but I think if it's the same product, your COA covers it no matter what. I think that what you're describing sounds like it might be more in line with some of the ideas that have been discussed on that property in the past, and I think they would probably be willing, that'd probably be a very easy change to just switch the product if that's what you wanted to do. I would recommend that you guys don't, that falls under COA, and a COA is a quasi judicial hearing, so there's kind of some implications for how you would talk about it right now. But I think that would be definitely something that staff can say, I think that it would be worth bringing that to Hprc. We might be able to just knock the whole thing out at once if you wanted to try to do that. So you could only have to be here one time.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna, it's just, we're going through a process right now. We're having kind of experts look at everything, review everything that was raised as a potential concern. I don't know what the ultimate outcome is. I just figured this is an opportunity where I can have a conversation with you guys.
I think that'd be in line with what some of the principles of historic preservation are in Idaho Springs have been expressed in our plans and guidelines and everything. So I think that sounds pretty interesting.
Well, I also think it's not appropriate that unless you brought a COA for us to really comment on it.
Sure, yeah.
But what I can say, and I hope that you know this, is that we've been very willing, if you say, hey, I really need to come in and talk to you guys, that we have said, hey, we'll do a special meeting,
Mhm.
because we do want you to complete the project.
Yeah.
So,
And the design guidelines allow a preliminary meeting that's non-binding, which the other boards of the town are not allowed to do. So this board can have a preliminary meeting with an applicant. It's just anything discussed will be non-binding.
Can this count as that meeting? And you have a better understanding of the code at this point than I do, I think so.
Well, normally something would be submitted that we'd be able to see.
Oh, okay.
And it's sort of relative as to how much. It does list what should be submitted. However, the fact is the intent of my belief was to allow this preliminary discussion because this tends to be such an expensive thing to do. We want to make sure the applicant has a good understanding before they wind up spending a lot of money on something.
We could schedule another work session like this if you'd like to discuss that.
Well, no, I think like what you reference is we did a preliminary meeting
Yes.
Back in 21, where it's kind of like, here's kind of the general sense of what we're trying to do. And that's when kind of the law concerns and all that stuff was first brought up.
And if you're looking at doing another CA or COA, there could be a preliminary meeting on that as well, because it is a new application at that point.
So I guess there's a little bit of latitude to have this conversation right now. If we'd like.
It's just with the understanding that it's not binding, because we won't have a complete set of plans that we're looking at.
yeah, I'm not willing to give up like any kind of opinion unless I can see it. I would say that if it is closer to what the original siding looked like, without lawn siding, I would be happier with that, but I would need to see it.
And I've got a sample out in my car.
Can we see-
Yeah.
Can we see it? We would love to
Yeah,
see it.
okay. We do that.
Are there any requirements for that meeting, like from a?
I don't remember the requirements. There is a list in the code of the submittal items, but I don't remember what kind of noticing, if anything, is required. I'm guessing there is some kind of noticing required, but that's pretty limited for this board compared to the other boards.
Well, that's what, I'm pretty sure you were with us in 2021 when we first came. Like, we had, I think, 2 meetings where we discussed this, and there was no action taken.
Right.
We're unable to take action tonight, so.
Yeah. So is he saying that he thinks that the siding that they've been putting up is installed appropriately?
That's what I was gonna ask.
Or is
Like,
it
it sounds
just-
like,
Can we
I
ask
haven't
that?
like inspected it, but it doesn't look like.
Wait, is it
The
new
thinner stuff is
siding?
okay.
They put up new siding.
It's
That's
hard.
what we approved with the last
It-
COA.
It's a wood product, but it's not traditional
It's
wood.
a composite.
Okay.
I would just say we're being a little gray.
Yes.
So this is the original siding. So the stuff I found down locally is identical with just the exception of right here
The bubble.
is slightly smaller.
So this piece, this angle of the bevel is like,
So
it
this
says
is,
3/4 versus
That's-
an inch.
this is 3/4.
Okay.
It would go down to 1/4.
So your reveal would be just.
And I know from having dealt a lot with the Park Service people, a question they would ask, if someone were standing in the middle of the street, could they tell the difference between 1 inch and 3/4 of an inch? But that's actually how they look at it.
Yeah.
Is could the average person passing by see this is different?
But the width, thickness, everything like that is right on spec. So, I was very excited about that. I'm sure it's a big cost difference besides what we have, and if it comes down to us having to remove the siding. I just wanted to make sure that the understanding with Hprc is there will be a decision to make. And then obviously part of the damages that we have on this contractor is if something happened to the siding, I had to remove it, and I got to put something like this back up. That obviously is a impact to the overall project and cost.
And there's a product available now that has that appearance, but does it have to be specially milled to achieve that shape?
That is true. So Rocky Mountain Forest Products is where I've been getting the quote from.
Okay.
They said there is an alternative, but the cedar they say right now is a very good price.
Is it another tongue?
Yep. I mean,
So you just, if you painting it, this doesn't come, it would, I don't think.
it would not be. You would have.
Yeah, I don't want to drive us into the gray areas.
No,
I was
no.
just curious, so when we do see plans, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted
You
to.
had a question.
Oh, sorry.
While he was out.
Wasn't I asked about it?
Yes, well, he wasn't
That
here.
might be, that might need to go
Okay.
according to Jonathan.
I'm,
I'd rather err on the side of caution.
what I would suggest is, Jonah, if you could, if we just stay in contact, I just want to make sure I'm available to you when you need me, like,
Right.
so when you're ready. And I've got drawings working and things like that.
Mhm.
We can have another meeting where they could potentially take action if required. I think we can, the COA that would be required, I don't think is gonna be an onerous process at this point, because everybody's so well versed in this project at this point that I think,
Even.
yeah. And we're all like motivated to make sure that you're able to get across the finish line. So if that would work for the HPRC, and then I would bring that back to you, and maybe, I don't know exactly when he'll be done, but if we can do it in March. The other thing is there is potential option to call a special meeting if we want to, and I would, of course, ask before I did such a thing, but,
Be happy then.
okay.
Even if we had to do it on Zoom, people couldn't get, like, because we've seen this and you can show us the,
Yeah.
Plans.
Yeah.
There's like a notice requirement for
Yeah,
that
there's a
hearing,
notice.
and that's really the only piece that we have to work around, and that is, I want to say, 14 days, I believe. So,
I think it's just a sign, isn't it? No,
On the
yeah, we
property.
put a sign for the COA.
yeah, I don't think we need to put anything in
A
it.
couple.
It
How many
used to be
times do
all
you have?
three, but it's changed while I was here.
Okay,
Do you have much of the siding left?
I have this in a couple other samples. These are some of the better quality samples, I guess you could say, even though it's
See, and I look at that and go, that's cool.
we plan on having some displays of kind of the parts of the property, the history of it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
No, the history of the property is extremely important to us. So, yeah, we plan on making sure that's available to people to kind of get connected.
I just actually found some pictures of it that I had never seen before, so I was gonna send them to you, so I just gotta
Yes.
do that. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much for coming tonight. I know it's
Absolutely.
gets late and we appreciate your time very
No,
much.
absolutely. Just in case there's any rumors in my mind.
No.
It's
We
been
appreciate you coming
a
now.
rough couple of months. so
Sorry you're delayed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get her done here.
Thanks for bringing that in.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we'll wait for that, for the next,
Yeah.
next piece of it.
I guess the one thing is, it's very valuable to have Mike here because he was planner for Idaho Springs before our last one, so he has some familiarity with the code. I know generally most of it, but it's good to have somebody who's dove deeper, which is good for HPRC.
It is. Okay, so with that, let's move on to the Jacobs House relocation. I'm pretty excited about this.
So, as I'm sure you're all aware, the Jacob House has been up on girders for some time now. Just for a little background, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, the city is working to construct a mobility hub at exit 240 of I-70. And a mobility hub is like an enhanced bus stop is a good way to think about it, but it's for all kinds of transit. So for bikes, pedestrians, eventually the AGS will come through here, which is the Advanced Guided Railway, when that eventually is built. And so what is really important to the city is that we have a really good place where residents and visitors can access mass transit services and things like that in the city. And that's a really good place for it to happen. So this project's been underway for about 12 years or so, like quite a while. And we are kind of in the step where we're about to be funded for a large portion of the project. We have done a lot of work to determine where the mobility hub needs to be. One element of it is a parking structure. There's some infrastructure improvements that would happen along 13th, and right at the exit, like a roundabout. We're working to construct a bridge potentially across the highway that would go to the towards the high school, the old high school across the way, and some other things like that. So basically what we're trying to do is create a really easy way to get to and from Idaho Springs, essentially. It'll connect to the Greenway Trail, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really cool project, but the piece of it that's really important for HPRC is there's 2 historic buildings that have to be moved to facilitate this project. And they could potentially be removed too, but what we've been doing is trying to move them so we don't lose them. Now, from an HPRC perspective, when you move a building, that does kind of, it's not ideal. It's not what you really want to do because of the historic significance it's associated with the site. So once you move a building, it can only be locally designated. It can no longer be designated at state level or the national level. But in these 2 cases, we cannot move forward with the 2 buildings, which is the Roberts Brothers Garage and the Jacobs House where they are, because the project is just, the space is not big enough to facilitate everything that needs to happen. And so what we've been doing is working to move the Jacobs House first. The Jacobs House, we've been working with the Hot Springs. They purchased the house from the city. The city kept the land, and the kind of thinking there is that we moved the Jacobs House over on Minor Street on the other side of the bridge, just a few lots down. You may have noticed there's a foundation that's been poured over there. That would be where it goes to. Right before Christmas, we had started the work to jack it up. We have a company, one of the bigger ones that moves houses, and there's only a few anymore that do that work because it's very intense. But they came and they started jacking it up. And in the process, they run into an issue where the brick is not fired brick, it's just pressed essentially and dried. And it's made in Idaho Springs, it's local brick, it's really cool stuff. But in the case of moving a house, the pressures are a lot. And so sometimes you gotta kind of see what happens as you go. And when that happened, there was some things that were concerning about what was going on. Nothing broke per se, but there's some challenges for sure. And so there's been some concern in the community. That's why it hasn't moved in several weeks. Yeah, because it's just, we don't want to move it and then start falling apart on minor streets. So we got like a structural engineer and they came and looked at it. It still could be moved, but there's a lot of things that have to be done. They need to drill some lateral supports into the brick. They need to do some things on the roof to make it structurally sound enough to move. And it's a challenge with old buildings, and it's not like 1 + 1 = 2 in an old building essentially. So we've been working with the Hot Springs on this, and the Hot Springs has, the project it's not the cheapest project ever, and they're reaching the point where they no longer feel like they can financially take on the burden of moving the house. So we've been working with them to determine how we might move forward. Andy's coming into the meeting right now, so I'll let him also speak if he's got anything. And in this process, we'd still like to move the house over there. We were also looking at some alternatives. One of the alternatives is to move it maybe somewhere a little bit closer. And so we've looked at some places towards City Hall, like coming to the east where it might be able to sit. We don't really have a great answer for where it's going yet, but the intention is to save the Jacobs House. That's what everybody wants to do. It's just a matter of finding a way to do it that's going to make sense. You know, we can't spend $2 million on the project, but we can spend a little bit more. The other thing is that it may be possible that becomes like some sort of employee housing for someone or something like that. And that's always a good thing in Idaho Springs. We have a pretty big problem in that area. So that's kind of where we have been. Yeah. The other thing is that foundation is still a good foundation. Like it's recently poured, and it was poured to support a giant brick building. So it can probably have, if the Jacobs House project doesn't work, we could probably put something else there. I mean, if we move the Jacobs House somewhere closer or something
Do
to
we
that
own that
effect.
land right there?
No, that's Hot Springs.
Okay.
So they were gonna own it and they were gonna use it for their employee housing for their manager or something. They're open to suggestions here and they're still willing to participate in the project. One of the things that has come up in this project, and I think that those of you that were at Saving Places talked about this a little bit, but the energy codes that are required of existing buildings are onerous for historic buildings. And they require a good amount of destruction to make buildings energy efficient. Like sometimes you have to rip out a roof. You might need a 14-inch roof where you previously had a 6 or 7-inch roof just to get the insulation level required. And
It's an R49.
yeah, it's very high. And our buildings in Idaho Springs, it's important that we maintain our fabric and our story here. And a lot of our buildings are never going to meet the requirements of existing building code.
Have they looked at the IEBC for allowing a lower standard?
Yes, and so that requires some work that's ongoing right now with city council. And our legal team is looking at that too, just to see. And the reason this is a really critical thing for the Jacobs House is that if it does not need to be brought to modern energy standards, not only do you save the interior of the building, which is just as beautiful as the exterior, it's got very cool, like all the interior features. It's got old plaster, which who knows if that'll make it through this smooth, but
Yeah.
but there's even things like in existing building code on the current year, like seismic requirements for historic buildings, which they're never going to meet. But we also know that they've been there since 1870. So,
Well, and get from from the conference, like the only way really to do it from the interior is to tear down
Yeah.
plaster, which,
it's a destructive
yeah, it's
process.
very destructive. So if we wouldn't have to do that, that would be great.
Yeah. So ultimately, this becomes a city council thing. But what we would like to do is to build contextually sensitive ways to save our historic properties and see them continue use while being safe. We don't want anybody living in an unsafe building, and just finding good ways to do that. And so for the Jacobs House, that's kind of the balance we're trying to find. Is how can we move it? How can we make sure it gets where it's going? And once it gets there, how can we make sure that it's reasonable to habitate?
On a side point, is there still discussion about moving the old railroad station back?
Yes, so that is a part of this project as well. The intention with the I don't know if you all know, the railway station that used to be in Idaho Springs was moved in the 1960s, I want to say, up
The depot?
the depot up 103. And it's still there and it's in good shape. And the property owner has been having some conversations with the city about how that might one day be able to be moved back. That's an easier building to move because it's a wooden frame construction instead of brick, and it's already been moved. So we know it can move in theory. So if it did move, it would come back not to its original location, which is where Come and Go sits now, pretty much oriented to where the Tesla parking is. But it would be able to be like essentially across the street, which is a lot better than currently. So that building could be used for any number of purposes, but that would be kind of like the gateway to the city, would be the intention.
Which would be awesome.
You guys have any other questions about the project or?
No, I asked.
Sure,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
When you're like talking about moving these buildings places and then having them be employee housing, is there gonna be any like acknowledgement that those buildings are historic? Like, I know that like the house across the street, they have at least a little plaque that says like it's an historic house.
So we have 3 levels of designation that happen in the city.
Okay,
There's local designation, which means that your body here makes a decision that house is historic or contributes to the historic nature of the city. There's a state designation, which same thing, just state level. And then there's the federal level designation. And of course, that's the hardest one to get. And Idaho Springs history is like very special. Like we have a lot more historic resources than a lot of places just because of the gold rush and a lot of other reasons. Also, Route 66 highway culture is another contributing factor. There's a couple different things that happen. So we have the ability to locally designate anything we want to designate, essentially. And ideally, we don't move things if we can avoid it. And we really work hard on that, but it's not always possible. So what we do is, as this body, is we'll designate a building locally. This building would likely be designated locally if we continue. And then the Roberts Brothers Garage also is not designated. It sits right outside the historic district, even though it's got significant historic contributions to the city. So what this gets into a further conversation with Hprc, but your body hasn't engaged in the process of designating properties or the process of helping people preserve their properties, which is what's done through tax credits. So there's a historic preservation tax credit, which is very valuable. And they can be used to help make historic buildings, to renovate them or whatever. Those plaques are actually something that's done by the Historical Society, so it's kind of like in step. But your group has not really been involved in that per se, but it would be really great to maybe have a work session with the Historical Society to talk about that. But what I would say is that this is something that in the historic survey plan, I know you guys probably all had an opportunity to read that as you're approving it, but that plan makes some recommendations specifically about storytelling in Idaho Springs and about designating property. And we know that there's quite a few properties that could have been designated all the way to the national level that didn't. And it was because when this happened, when the first surveys were really done that kind of recommended some of this work, Tabor had just been passed in Colorado, which is the taxpayer bill of rights. And there's some implications for how there was a lot of things about money at the time and restrictions on homes and things like that, and what you could and couldn't do if you had historic property. A lot of communities have evolved past that point now and have found some really contextual ways to handle situations so people can still, build upon and preserve their history while having an opportunity to improve their house. Like for instance, like you don't necessarily have to keep your house on the inside as like 1910. You can update it and then make sure your facade has certain elements or whatever. So. Oh, no, that's fine.
Did you get a copy of, because you can go back and look through the survey that we did. Look at the very back of the survey. She's got the list of plans like of our recommendations. I think there's 7 of them, 7 or 8.
Seven projects.
7 projects, and this is part of it. And actually, that will bring us into our next piece as well. Thank you for that. I was worried about that, but when Jacob's house has been sort of lagging, I'm like, oh, this isn't.
It got to the point where right now it's okay. And so we were like, let's make sure it stays that way and then we'll go to the next step. But I would imagine I will have an update for you at the next meeting, if not at city council, but as soon as I know, you'll know one way or the other. So.
But where are they thinking about moving the Roberts brother garage to?
Right now, we're talking about right behind CenturyLink building, which is right by the Vintage Moose. So it'd be almost just east of the Vintage Moose in that spot.
Okay,
And
so
we're
not too
doing,
far, yeah.
and we would do some parking lot reconfigurations as a part of the larger project. So we wouldn't actually lose any parking to do that, and we can reconfigure the drive aisles so they're a little bit more standard and consistent. Because right now there's a
Is this
problem
more on
with,
the pedestrian mall area?
it would be right against it. So it also, that's a good thing from a planning perspective to enclose the pedestrian area if possible to build a barrier. So I think it could create a good kind of vibe right there. And then that building would maintain, the current owner would continue to own it. And what we would do as a city is we'd move it and then he could either finish restoring it or whatever he'd like to do from that point forward.
It's not the whole building though, is it? It's like that
Correct.
last third of it, we can't.
There's a section of it that was built, I want to say it was built in the 1890s, the original part of it, and the second half was built in the early 1900s. And you can see the distinction between the two sides. There's a large, the door facing east, that's the original building. And then if you go to the west a little bit, you'll see one that's facing north, and that part is an addition. And we don't have a feasible way to move the addition. So we would save the original building. It used to have a garage, or not a garage, I'm sorry, a basement as well. And that at some time was filled in. So currently it has a sloped concrete floor. And so it may be that when the new owner talks about the build out, we may build a basement into the new building, which would be consistent with its previous life. But that's kind of that part of the conversation hasn't really happened yet. The Roberts Brothers garage has considerably bigger engineering
Issues.
questions because it's like 2 courses of brick. The Jacob's house is 3 courses of brick, so it's a little bit easier from a stability standpoint to move. This one is going to be challenging, but we're still working on it.
Any other questions, guys? All right, thank you very much for that, Jonathan. I appreciate that. I don't know about you guys, I've gotten questions about when it's gonna move. People want to see it move. I'm like, maybe that's not a good thing. Because
Moving one piece.
yeah, because trailing bricks along, as it goes down the road. Oh,
Yeah, I was wondering
yes.
myself, because they said, oh, it's gonna move in December, and then be pushed out to January, and then January,
Yeah.
February, but I'm like.
And there used to be houses between the creek and Minor Street. There were actually quite a few buildings that were there.
Well, wasn't that building, like, just to digress from it, wasn't that building between 2 stamping mills, which is why it's probably 3 rows of brick deep, because it was between 2 ore mills.
The Mixel is very close to there. There was a mix, there's a couple, that's essentially true.
It would show up on the sandboard maps.
Yeah.
As to what was there before
It was great.
in that whole area.
So I know you can't really see this, but this is the gem right here. This is a big gold vein right here that was dug. There used to be a city park right here, which is where the creek and the highway are currently. So you can see Water Street, which is right against the highway, used to have a whole another 3 blocks on the other side of it. And then it was right about here. So you've got Colorado Power Company, which is one of the very first hydroelectric plants in the west of the Mississippi. It was like right here, and then you get the gem processing stuff right here. And then the Mixel was like right here. So it was probably a very loud and vibrating place at one time.
Little earthquakes all the time.
Okay, so moving on to our strategic plan, I'm gonna ask you, Jonathan, do you have something with this first before?
No, I'm just excited about this conversation. I know those of you that went to the same places, there's a lot. It's always a really fun conference. And so in the future, we always want to make sure our Hprc has that opportunity, and there'll be other training opportunities too. So you miss one, you don't necessarily miss everything for sure. But there's a lot of things that are happening in historic preservation. And one thing that's really cool about Colorado is our community is very vibrant in that space.
Yes.
So there's a lot of ideas and a lot of different things we can do. We just had this survey plan that you guys just approved, and that plan, the city spent about $15,000 on it. It was grant funded, which is great. And it identified several strategies. And so I would like to just keep that in your mind as you have this conversation, that we have had some strategies that have been approved by this body and by city council. And I think that there's a lot of ways to move towards accomplishing those goals that are there. I really, I think we're all here for the same reason. Like, the historic preservation is really important. And I think that you have some really great opportunities to do what's in that plan, and then some probably like low-hanging fruit that kind of surrounds it. Right now, from a staff capacity standpoint, I just want to say that I think that it would be really great to have some really clear directives about what you guys would like to accomplish and timelines, and I'm not trying to like pour water on the fire, but just like a focused approach to goals.
Yes.
City council has recently done this too. They have a thing over there, which is on the wall, which is publicly facing, but there's 6 goals that they have, and they're built into some small kind of sub goals as well. That's sometimes a really good strategy, but I want you guys to be able to do what you'd like to do. I think that there's some interest in reviving some of the community engagement and education efforts, and maybe getting some more grants, which is always a thing that we can do. So I think that I want to let you guys have your conversation and give me some feedback. And what I would propose is that we'll take some notes here, and maybe at our next meeting, I could propose like some kind of beginnings of a draft plan to kind of think about your strategies. And then we would probably be able to start that work. We can start that work pretty quickly, I think.
Well, I think there's definitely some low-hanging fruit. I know, like, I went through, and you're right, we have to be focused. I went through my notes, I don't know if you guys did, from the conference, and I had to funnel it down because I had like 4 pages of takeaways from this conference. So the first thing I would like to do, we are the Historic Preservation Review Commission. And one of the things that I noticed at the conference is that a lot of them are historic preservation commissions, which I think are different. So my concern is that if we go into stuff that's more HPC, does that still fall under our charter or our directive?
I know you, do you want to go first?
It's in the chapter, it's in the historic preservation chapter, I think it's 24, but it actually says, this is what this commission has been charged with doing. And there's a list of more than a half a dozen items. And that will say, this is what the board, the elected officials wanted this committee to be doing. It doesn't mean it couldn't be changed, but it's actually in the municipal code.
There is I know there have been conversations at Hprc level and staff level in the past that there's probably a good case to be made that we should review our historic guidelines and the ordinance. So that is probably something that hasn't been done in a long time. So that could be something we undertake.
Well, the reason I ask that is, do we do it like, an auxiliary committee? This is HPC stuff, this is Hprc stuff, because that is actually that's been one of my goals for a long time, is to redo our design guidelines. If you guys have read the design guidelines, there's room for improvement.
It's old too. This one's from 2007. I think that's the most latest one.
And there's a lot that it doesn't cover. There's a lot of gaps in it, and there's a lot of inconsistencies between the application for the design guidelines and the municipal code.
Absolutely. But also, I definitely want to get started on the very first thing in our survey, which was the citywide survey. I think the citywide survey, that's the one that's 45 to 60,000. I think that is a cornerstone for a lot of the things. Like, I know I talked with Shannon a little bit and Patty, and I talked with Jonathan and Mike. about a lot of the things that we want to do going forward. Just because that citywide survey, I think, is going to touch a lot of the different aspects. One thing that I would like to highlight is that, is it CPI that is doing the 150 endangered places?
Yes,
So CPI is doing 150 endangered places by the bicentennial, 150th anniversary of Colorado. Every year they do endangered spaces, and they want to add more diverse spaces, not just from our Western cowboy heritage, but folks that maybe came out here, you know, like the Asian population that came out to work on the railroads and things like that. And if you look at our survey, I think 6 on our survey is our ethnic history. I would really like to have some of our, like, a focus on our ethnic history so that we can contribute something to that.
one thing our survey plan didn't mention that probably we should have, it's the Arapaho and Ute history in this place too. That is a very significant story.
Yes. No, when I think of ethnic history, I don't just think of folks that came here from other places, but also the indigenous people that were here, you know, because they also were displaced and part of history. But I really, when I heard her talking about that, this is the head of CPI, I was like, wow, you know, that really goes in line with what our survey recommended for us. It's just buzzing. That I would like, that's something that I would like, even though that's lower on our list of things, I would like that to be one of our, like, our goals, and that's 26. So we have a couple of years to get that together. I think it may take some work because that's not history that has been, I think, was easily preserved or easily accessible.
Yeah, like some Sanborn maps will say like Chinese laundry and stuff like that, and you can sometimes find stuff from census, but
Usually one of the best sources are the historic newspapers,
yeah,
in terms of, because you can actually literally track things from building to building, how people move from one building to another.
So my first question for you guys would be, we talked about, I think the last meeting, what our main goals were. Do we still feel like those would be our main goals as far as addressing the aspects of the survey recommendations? I know we talked about the citywide survey, helping people get the tax credits, and this goes along with designation. I have some other ideas on that I want to ask you guys about. What else stuck out to you guys? Definitely our ethnic history.
Well, the second thing you mentioned is that it also includes just the overall outreach communications, because that will need to be done anyway with any of these projects.
Oh my gosh,
There'll
yeah.
need to be the public engagement part.
So that brings me, and now we move back to much more funneled and very low hanging fruit. May is Historic Preservation Month, and one of the talks that we went to was how to really bring people into Historic Preservation Month. And Mary Teresa, who did our survey, actually is on the Buena Vista Historic Preservation Committee. And last year they did this, and they did, of all things, they did a coloring contest. And the coloring contest was a huge hit. And one of the things that I think I talked to Patty and Jonathan about at this conference was having the 11 and older age group create a design, like in April. And then in May, you have the 10 and under group color the design. And there are prizes for all. I talked to the local ice cream shop. She's like, we'll give you we'll give you certificates, you know, for ice cream or whatever, but local things, so that, and have them come up with something like City Hall or the Argo, or things that are local to Idaho Springs. Also, she talked about, they did a taste of Buena Vista. I love it. We've done a taste of Idaho Springs. And do you have updates on that from Sadie? Because I think Jonathan talked to Sadie like that week.
So I'm also the vice president of the Chamber of Commerce. And so we have already established a quota event, 2, 3, 4 quota events that would happen in May potentially, that would all be centered around historic preservation. So that work is already done. So those events exist. What I would need is support from Hprc to kind of be programming. And so I would coordinate with Sadie, and if anybody's interested in building these events, Patty is the one who ran Taste of Colorado before, Taste of Idaho Springs before. So she's got experience doing that event. The other thing that I wanted to mention is, I guess this is partial, but it may not work this time, but we were talking about an award, potentially, a historic preservation award.
I was getting there.
Okay, but we have set up for May to be very activated downtown. And so it really depends on what Hprc wants to involve themselves in on that thing, but we could set this thing up and then the chamber will help promote.
Well, also, it's, and Patty is ending the month with the borough races. Like, I love that idea that the borough races are at the end of the month because that just goes along with our history. I agree with Mike that we really have to do the community engagement, and they don't see what we don't show. You know, so how do we get, like, one of the talks that I went to talked about the values of historic districts. Did you hear him that, you heard him that, you weren't, maybe you weren't there.
Oh, not that one, no.
You know, Jonathan talked about how when this first started, people didn't like the idea of a historic district because it's regulations, it's gonna drive down, you know, property values. The gentleman that spoke on Friday did a study across 10 cities. And they were varying sizes from 30,000 to like Raleigh, North Carolina. And across the board, like 60 to 70% of the people that had historic districts, both local historic districts and national historic districts, the property values were higher. Resale was quicker. Foreclosures were less. There was greater interest in bringing new business, having higher rates of employment. You know, people wanted to be there. Like, and he said, we found this in all the demographics. And what's really interesting to me is that the national historic districts did very well. You know what did better though was the local historic districts. There was actually greater economic viability, less foreclosures, more people wanting to be there, more people wanting to work there than there was in the, did you guys notice that in that, when his graphs, the local historic districts had more financial viability than the national. So I think the idea of working towards local historic districts for Idaho Springs, this goes towards designating like the Roberts Garage and the Jacobs House. I think that's a great idea because I think we have a very unique history. So I would like to see us showcase our unique history.
That gentleman, I'm just saying, passing conversation here, indicated that he wanted to come to Idaho Springs to talk.
Did he?
So I think we'd have to figure out if that's an actual viable option, but I was gonna suggest is
His
that,
name?
well, yeah, so that's, but there may be some people that can help with that, like chamber or something. So what I was gonna suggest is that we could see if he's interested in coming in. This could be an engagement kickoff piece if we wanted him to, and you could do like either an open house or community forum kind of event here at City Hall or maybe at the United Center, depending on how big it's looking. And then that could be, but an event like that talks about the benefits of historic preservation. That would be something we have to coordinate a little bit and plan, but I think
I'll
we
work
could
with
do
you
it.
on that one because that guy, you guys, that guy was amazing. I can't remember his name.
Rip come out.
Rick Kamar?
Yeah, Don Rip come out.
Don Rick, I was thinking it was Dick Rickmore, but I'm like, that's not it. It was amazing. And here's the numbers, here's the facts, here's the actual data that supports, when you support this in your community, it actually helps your community. I would also, and towards that community engagement, I would like us to think about how do we work towards creating local historic districts. I talked to a lady who did this in Lincoln Park in Denver. I think Patty was there with me when we talked to her. And because they did a local historic district, they expanded their period of significance to 100 years. So they were able to incorporate, you can use a chain link fence. You can have vinyl windows, because one of my personal goals is that if we do these, how do we make it easier for the residents to live there and it's not a financial burden for them? You know, replacement now, if we're all in a historic district, is expensive. I mean, Jonah is a perfect example of that. So how do we do this in a way that makes it easier for the residents, allows them to perhaps, this also goes towards number 3 or 4 on our survey, access tax credits. It's not as, the 2018 changes made it not as friendly, but you can still get a significant boost from the tax credits.
Have you worked in a community that has set up multiple periods of significance or extended it, or?
No, but Aspen's one of the best known examples. It has 2. It has the Victorian mining period, and then it has the Alpine ski period right after World War II. So they're physically separate districts. So I haven't worked in one, but I know of some that have different periods.
And that's a good point, because if you look at West Idaho Springs, that's much more the Victorian mining, because that actually used to be First Street down there, like the streets were flip-flopped. And then as you go east, the center is a mix of residential and commercial. And then as you go further east, it's like the Route 66. So it's a completely different time period. So I really think, that's something that we would have to take into account. And I think it makes it potentially thorny.
Yeah, the survey plan, if we design a project, we could ask for grants for that. And this is something that we could probably we have to talk about how and when we apply and all that kind of stuff, and we need to have some conversations with History Colorado. But we have this need to do does everybody know what intensive survey is, what that means? It's basically a survey of town, of all the buildings that might have significance. And the person who's doing that survey goes through a pretty regulated and in-depth process to examine the history of the building, kind of the facade that you see on the building when you're there, and whether there's anything that degrades its historic fabric. So it's kind of a big process. That's why it's like $60,000. But we could probably get a grant for it. And I think that in this grant, we could probably build a scope of service that would cover
Yes.
some of these ideas to get some recommendations.
But $60,000 would be like for a neighborhood. Doing something citywide would be several $100,000.
Yeah, we could start tackling these survey projects. So if we did the whole city, or if we want to do, West Colorado Boulevard had a survey, an intensive survey that was done in 2003, I want to say. And that was recommended to be a historic district. We also have the Grass Valley.
Is that still applicable though? 20 years ago?
I think a lot of them, well, no, we can't use it anymore, but we can update it, which might be actually cheaper if they have all the because we have all the survey documents. We just,
And the state has a lot of those
Yeah, they have
documents as well. And one of the things to look into is getting someone from Idaho Springs designated to have access
Yeah.
to the information.
I currently do.
You do?
Yeah. So also, were you here when we did the westbound Peak Creek Shoulder Lane 106? So there was a project for westbound Peak Creek Shoulder Lane where Grass Valley was surveyed. You might have read that in the survey plan as well. That's by Safeway. That goes Minor Street kind of east.
Mhm.
And those homes were a separate city originally.
Yes.
And so that was also recommended for designation. And then we've got several other single kind of standing entities that were recommended to the National Register. And some of those properties could likely use some additional funding to help maintain and preserve them. And I think it might be something, one of the things we had talked about that I thought was really interesting was there is a group that has in one of the cities that had created a historic buildings list. And it's not really a designation list, but it's just saying, hey, this property is significant and you should know the story of it. And then talking to people and using that as a entry point for engagement, and then, giving them the options to continue through that process, or if they don't want to, then they don't have to.
And to some extent, the survey plan has already started that.
Yeah.
Because it's a very comprehensive inventory of buildings throughout the city.
Well, that appendix A in the back, if you guys read that, that's probably my favorite piece of the whole survey.
Giant list.
Yeah, because it just goes through every single building and it says, it's this architecture type. Here's the level, is it medium, low, or high significance? And so it goes through, and here's what we know about it. Like, that would be, and when I've talked to people, did you guys all look up your houses? Because I looked at my house.
Oh, yeah, mine and Shannon's.
Yeah, low
doesn't have-
significance. Kind of bump this out.
Like, I think that's a beginning of a way to start engaging people. You're like, it's significant. And, which is a big deal here. I think, you guys tell me what you think. Like, I feel like if we can start getting the infrastructure in place for the surveys that we need to set up, like, our committee or our processes, like, that's where I think we need to start, because we don't have any infrastructure. It's just been this committee and, the 6 or 7 COAs that roll through every year, and that's all we do.
One thing that staff could do is reach out to History Colorado and see about the grant cycle and see what money is available and what they're thinking about the project.
And the main piece besides their money is the Paul Root
Yes.
grant, which supposedly they're now saying you could contact them about it. So the sooner that's done, the better. Because that would be a distributing, basically they are an umbrella who will then make smaller grants to other entities.
We could staff could research both opportunities, and at our next meeting, we could discuss, typically History Colorado August, right, is their application.
It used to be twice a year. I don't know if it's still twice a year, but it was usually in the spring and in the fall. Like
Yeah, I wanted to say it was a May, August deal
Yeah,
or
so,
something.
yeah, something.
We probably are not gonna make it May.
Usually 6 months apart.
Yeah. But we probably could make an August deadline if we wanted to, and it's something that we could bring back to you at our next meeting and discuss. I don't know if you guys are familiar with how the city does projects, but essentially, if it's a grant funded project, we'd apply for the grant and you guys would be involved in the process of we'd have review of the narrative and make sure that it fits what you guys are looking for. And then once we were awarded a grant, we would go through an RFP process to find a contractor to do the work. But one of the really cool things about the survey plan that we did was it was the very first survey plan created by History Colorado. And the whole purpose of that was to give us like a runway so that we could more easily apply for grants. So we come in with that survey plan and coming through the goals, we're supposed to have, I don't know if they want to say preferred status, but we're supposed to have to score better because we're coming from that survey plan document. So this is something from a low hanging fruit perspective that we could probably knock out. We need to look at the city budget, make sure we have match for what's required and look at the total cost of what we've been doing and all that kind of stuff. But I could bring something back to you at our next meeting if you guys would like to do that.
I would love to see,
Yeah.
I would love to get some of the infrastructure going, because these are not like, you know, one and done projects. Like this is several, like when Jonathan and Patty and I were chatting, it was, okay, 22, 23, 23, 24, 25, like moving into 26. It's like a 5-year, you know, plan. There is a lot, but I think there's a lot that we haven't done. So our eyeballs are opened and now we're like, wow, there's a lot we haven't done. From a more immediate standpoint, what, anybody else? I've been hogging the floor here. What else did you guys hear from the conference that you would like to see that we bring home to us?
Well, there was a facade improvement thing for, I know this is, the downtown district has already had a lot done to it, but it's something that businesses will apply to, and they not only do like the physical facade like rehab, but they also do like energy efficiency too, which would be huge. So it's a pretty cool program.
And so they actually get funding and help for the energy improvement?
Yeah.
Because I did the energy improvement panel and that was depressing. Well, no, it's really expensive. It's really expensive. You know, like it's time consuming and there's a lot involved to it. So anything that could help our downtown area would be great.
We actually have a facade improvement program.
Oh,
Okay.
It's just not
I
presently
just-
funded.
okay.
So we had originally about, I want to say we had $60,000 over 2 years to do facade improvements in town. And we spent that on $1,500 matching grants because we were doing something with Henderson Mine. And they generated about $600,000 in investment in the city over that 2 years, which for us is quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really good program. The other thing I'd like to mention to you is that we are working on this mobility hub. And so one of the things that is going to pay for that is parking revenue. So that's one of the reasons that it's set up the way it is currently. But once that debt is gone, there's really no need to continue using parking revenue for parking structure aside from the O&M costs. And one of the things we've discussed is whether or not we could create a facade improvement program like you're talking about. That would be maybe funded a little bit better to pay for some of these improvements that are required. Fort Collins actually is a really cool program. If you guys are interested in looking, they have this like a historic easement that comes with the money, which doesn't really hurt the property owner at all. It just makes sure that the improvements are taken care of. Like it's an O&M money basically. So, but it's a really cool thing.
Well, I think we're gonna have to look at figuring out, is there a way that we can do some direct funding for HPC and HPRC projects? Because we haven't really done anything that requires funding, but a lot of this stuff is gonna require some effort on our part financially.
Funding conversations will start early in the summer for budget for the city. And I would think that one of the things we could do, and this would be something we'd want to do pretty immediately because it's going to take you guys a little bit of time, is if there were some funding requests that you wanted to consider, to look at that. Now, when city funding happens, it's kind of like you got to look at funding sources you have and the money that you have coming in and money going out. And there's a lot of prioritization that happens, like police officers and all the different things that are really important for the city. But I think that if we could come up with some reasonable funding requests for city council, that they would be more than supportive of that. So I would recommend, I guess what I'm trying to say is if we're gonna go down the budgeting path or we're gonna have some budget requests, I would recommend that happen before June.
Okay. I'm willing to work with you on that.
In addition to looking at the design guidelines and the municipal code chapters, the other type of document would be to do an actual preservation plan. In other words, that's sort of a longer term thing where you're looking at a 5 to 10 year horizon in terms of what is that longer term strategy and where do you want to wind up?
You know, on that point too, the city's comp plan is ready to be updated. It's from 2017. And there is a preservation component in that plan. So it might be good to have that work.
That could be expanded. We just did Palmer Lake. We just from for the first time, we put that into their plan, is that there are policies regarding historic preservation, but well, you're right, it is in the existing plan, but it is something that could be expanded.
And we had been talking about updating the comp plan in general, because it's getting on 5 years old now, so.
Yes, I love the idea. We can do something with the facade.
And energy stuff too, it sounds like there's a lot of really cool new energy technology coming up, so.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's pricey too.
Yeah.
Some of that like basically shape shifting energy aspects.
But sort of another approach on that though, is that there could be quite a number of houses that would just benefit from paint and caulk. And that might be something else as a house parallel to a commercial building. Facade program would be basically just fix up the exterior of houses. Basically, if they just had paint and caulking, it would make a difference.
And continue to protect the original siding that they have.
I like that idea. I like that a lot.
One other idea, but I would say this is probably a low priority, but it might have the possibility of money from GOCO for trails. And that would be to do some kind of marker program along the route of where the Colorado Southern Railroad ran through the town. Because at every point it had to repeatedly cross streets. So that would be something possible to do, is to sort of trace that route and possibly make that into some kind of trail.
It's a cool idea. Yeah, that's really cool.
Do we still have rail underneath some of the roads?
Probably,
Just skate right over it.
there's a lot of
Usually
things
what
in those
happens,
roads.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to pry it out, so.
Yeah.
Riverside, the route ran, if you guys can imagine where the train is here, it ran this way and then it went up Riverside. And then it went over towards US 6, basically. Right,
That's a really
Yeah.
good idea, Mike.
there's actually some archaeology work that might potentially be beneficial to the town around the railway, and also the Ute and Arapaho tribes and the mining industry. There's like, for instance, Virginia Canyon Park, up on the hill where we built our trail, our first trail, and we're gonna build more. There's like, I think, there's well over 200 open shafts on that property.
And I think with the I-70 work that's being done, they were gonna be destroying some previous sites that don't have anything.
Yeah.
But maybe there's the opportunity of some guilt there in terms of
Yeah,
they're gonna destroy those sites as a place of commemorating things.
Just full of ideas today.
That is, you know what, I like that. Just do a little flip flop. Well, with that, so, keep thinking, because we can send these to Jonathan, because you have not enough to do.
that's okay. This is a passion for me, so don't worry about that.
I'd really like to, are you guys willing to like throw in some time and effort to Historic Preservation Month? Because
Yeah,
this will not work
absolutely.
without all of us cattle prodding each other and other folks along. There will need to be some cattle prod. I would love to work with Bojo's, because Bojo's is doing, so that their 50th anniversary is April 1st, but April 1st through May 31st, they're doing a scavenger hunt. And at the end of the month, they're giving away an ounce of gold. So do we have some area, like, can we come up with like three locations or something? Like how, I haven't talked to you yet because I wanted to talk to you guys first. How do we come up with, a couple of areas that we add in that are historically significant for Idaho Springs? Maybe not just City Hall. Are there other places that would get people to go?
I think in terms of community engagement, two other entities would be the school district and the library.
Yes.
Because actually it's a Carnegie Library, which has significance in and of itself. But also it's the only building of that architectural style in town.
They may already be involved. I have a friends of the
They are.
library meeting.
They're not in the Bojo things, but they probably would like to be.
Well, I have friends of the library on Thursday, so
Okay,
I'll
cool.
bring it up to them.
We do have a CODA event set for that too, so you guys being involved in these efforts will make things a lot. It's not just that it would be cool to bring history, it's gonna be helpful to have more people involved in some of these things. We can make the party happen if we can get people to help coordinate some of this work, and that's been one of the challenges it's always a challenge in Idaho Springs stuff.
Small town, even smaller group of regular volunteers. Welcome to Voluntold. The other thing I want to talk, this goes along with, since we're figuring out how to move for Jacob's house. And I would also like to ask if we could maybe get a little donation from the Roberts Garage when he moves. one of the things that they talked about in Brighton, they do what's called a brick award. I love this. I'm in love with this. They've taken bricks from old buildings in Brighton, and they have a special plaque made that goes onto the brick. And people that have been involved in like the preservation of Brighton get a brick award. These bricks are actually made in Idaho Springs.
They're special.
They're special, that you can't get them anywhere else. I have a couple from my old house. So I would like to institute, the Idaho Springs, either Historical Society or the Idaho Springs Historic Preservation Brick Award. And I keep trying to come up with another name for it. And there's nothing that I like a foundation award, a brass plaque. I'm like, oh, it's a brick. It's a brick.
Call it brick.
Well, because it's such a blatant, like, oh, look, Brighton, let me just grab your idea. But it's such a fantastic idea. So there you go, Brighton.
And there could be like an annual award that's given in several different categories. That's been done in one of the other places I've worked, where you had for, say whether it was an addition or infill or whatever, but you would actually give awards for the sake of, and all it is just free publicity for that property owner. In other words, it doesn't tie them down to anything, but it's sort of recognition of someone's done a good job.
But people like that. I mean, I like to hear when, other people say, well, at least you did a great job. Everybody's like that. And if you put, blood, sweat, and tears in your checkbook into your building, it's nice to hear, wow, you did a great job. So I would like to institute that idea into our historic preservation month.
If you guys were, depending on the level of, I know I would not be able to do this on behalf of Hprc by myself, but there is no longer any gala in Idaho Springs that's not happening currently. I don't know if you guys are.
They're working on it.
Okay. There may be space for another similar event though, or maybe
Or we could do it in
partnership.
conjunction,
Yeah,
because, conjunction would be really, really good, because you have two entities that are fanatics about historic preservation and want to work together and make everything better, so.
it could provide a revenue source for a project, so
Can
if it was.
you expand a little? Is this the historical society?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because we haven't had one for a couple of years. And Zuri and his wife have always been so supportive in letting us, the last couple of years, allowing us up at their facility, but they are like booked up to here. So there isn't a warm period available to have anything there, so we would,
Where?
Blackstone.
Okay.
Sorry. So we'd have to find a different venue to do it, but we're actively figuring that out, talking about it right now. So that would be awesome.
I would love to do, like Brighton again, they were talking about, they do a gala every year. They do a silent auction. It's a fundraiser. They have combined their gala and their brick awards. And I think one of the ways that people become more invested is when there is, you can actually see what's being done, but also there's recognition of what is being done. So what CODA events do you guys have?
We blocked out the weekends, and that's as far as we've got.
Okay,
So right now, what a CODA event is downtown. That's when we allow drinking throughout downtown, so that we promote activation of all the spaces downtown, essentially. So we're going to do this for the Bojo's event for just the Saturday. We
It's April 1st.
tentatively blocked those times to run the CODA, but we don't really have any events built around them yet. So there's a lot of different ways we could do it. For Bojo's, we're only closing the middle block. We could close all 3 blocks if we think we have the capacity to fill it, but I would recommend a busier looking small area is better than an empty looking big area. So, and for staff purposes, we need a little bit of runway here to make sure that we get everything we need accomplished. But what could happen is, we've talked about a couple of things. If we did Sadie Peak, I don't know if you guys all know her, but she's the person who a lot of times coordinates the marketplace for the chamber and works with me on that. But what she has been wanting to do, we used to have what we call our kickoff the summer event. And it was a parade with the kids in it, and then there would be like a barbecue or something. And that has fallen off since COVID, just because we couldn't do it. We also have a cleanup the city day, that's like a trash day where we have dumpsters and all that kind of stuff. So we do a lot of that kind of thing in springtime. So there's some opportunity maybe to coordinate with other events. Or if we have an event that we just want to do that would be fun, we could do that for a weekend or a day. One thing that is kind of adjacent here is there's a guy, his name's Mike, he runs Andy's School downtown. He's wanted to have like a swap meet, but like more antique focused for a while.
Oh my God, I love it.
He's got all the coolest stuff in the whole world too. So But something like that, we could do something like that. We have a lot of flexibility. The question is that if we're gonna do something that's different than currently happens, I sometimes, if it's different than council expects, I need to tell them about it and get approval for that, and that just takes a minute. But council's really great. They've been really great about this in the past. So I think as long as we have a good plan and it's functional, what I would typically do is ask our city administrator, Andy Marsh, and we bring it to council and see if they approve it. But usually if we have good cause and a good plan, that's my impression.
They're very supportive,
Yeah.
council's very supportive. They were very happy with our I came and they voted on the survey and they were happy with the survey plan. You know, it's nice to, not only that we had to get it done, but it's nice to have it. Patty, what do you have planned for Borough Days? That's the 31st?
It's the weekend, so it's in Georgetown on Saturday and it's in Idaho Springs on Sunday. And then Memorial Day is or
We've already got the street closed for that.
Monday is.
But I mean, like, should we throw a taste of Idaho Springs in there? Could we do like minor day, snack packs or like, how do we?
Do you need somebody to do the food drop?
No, actually, CCMRD is going to work on.
That is.
It's the 29th, 30th, and 31st, I think.
Is that like how Patty beat up?
Yeah.
How
um,
have you
I've
been
heard of that.
It is.
Yes.
I was
So
exactly
actually,
what it
Georgetown does it actually,
Oh,
like
borough
they
days?
do
Borough
squares on their street.
Hmm.
And then as boroughs run across there, whoever poops the most in that square,
It's
if you
gonna be
picked it,
27th and
and it's 10
28th.
bucks a square, then you win whatever the money was.
Okay.
Idaho Springs does it virtually.
Oh.
So we have 400 squares and you buy the squares and then we take the wheel and go, psst, and it spins the wheel and, the last
Mostly,
couple-
it was hard to get somebody to take care of it afterwards.
it's still a challenge when they walk through town.
Yeah.
so. But so we have had vendors before on Idaho Mall. Not the first year, because I was still trying to figure out what we were doing, but for 2 or 3 years, we had vendors on Idaho Mall, which went over really good. We made sure that we had nobody that was competing with any of the shops in town. Like we had jewelry, it had to be handmade and totally different than what our jewelers in town were doing. And we didn't have any food vendors. We have enough restaurants that we did a restaurant, we
It's
had a
such a
hat
kind of nice
guy.
for all the people though that don't do food, that do. And we also, if I correct me if I'm wrong, we also include our folks that are not necessarily downtown, like Big B's or, if they want to be downtown.
Yes, if they want to bring their product down, they can do that. Like Westbound and Down did breakfast burritos 1 year behind their building. Bojo's is too busy, they didn't do anything, but Spice and Tea came on to Idaho Mall and, did that. So that's an option too, or we could also do it on Minor Street. But it'd be hard to bring in vendors unless we got certain
There's some
spots.
rules about that we have to follow, so.
Yeah. But having vendors would be a good thing. The problem right now is, like this group, you have 6 people and 2 people do stuff. So it's really hard to coordinate everything.
It's actually usually called STP, the same 10 people.
It's more like ST2.
It's not like a water on the fire thing too, it just, things go.
Yeah.
No, that's completely,
It's kind of just how it works out, because not everybody has time. And you end up again with the same few people that have to do everything, and sometimes it's too much.
There are some like virtual tour things that you can do, like you get an app on your phone and do a virtual tour of stuff. I was going to suggest at Hprc that I do a lot of work with Hprc adjacent, but not exactly here. And a lot of it is like restoring the train. We're restoring the coach right now and it's in Silver Plume. And I love to show people if possible, and I'd love to show you guys what's happening. And there's the tunnel across the river and all these cool things that people don't see and don't see the story.
oh my God, I would love to
Yeah.
do like a tour of the tunnel. across
I'd
the
love to
river.
take you guys around. The host house we just finished on the west end is super cool.
Is it done?
Almost doors and windows, but there's like, we found this old graffiti inside from like 1890s. And it's super cool and we saved it. So
So we
it's,
plasticked it, we put.
yeah, it's
Yes.
ground into the window frame. So it's very cool. But I would love to show, that's something I would love to do with you guys if you'd ever like to come and just look
Yes.
and learn about what we're doing on
Look
those
at all
things.
the,
Yeah.
yes.
But if you had the opportunity to do that with even a tourist, where you could maybe have a sticker, an HPRC sticker in a window that had a QR code on it or something where people could because you see people looking at those plaques all the time, and to be honest, those plaques are not accurate. They are a little messed up.
Oh.
So if you had an ability to control that, maybe another good project to work on the Historical Society, but you could do a little walking tour around town that has properties on it.
And there actually is a book that
Mhm.
walks up and down town and goes through all the buildings that have the plaques on it was created by the Historical Society several years ago. It just really needs to be updated and,
Yeah.
I don't know
You know.
what it is.
We can always get more plaques too, but
yeah,
Well,
and
but
it was a
also-
self-tour too. so.
A self-tour, and maybe if like once a month we do a docent tour. I used to be a docent. I love doing that. That's that's just a volunteer that tells you all the history. I used to be a docent for the
There's
ferry.
also a gal in town who wants to do tours kind of like that, but focusing more on the women of Idaho.
Oh, Erin.
I met her,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, can
I'm
we please,
excited
can we
to,
please
do
throw out the
that.
line and bring her in?
Yes.
Because yeah,
I did the tour of booze and brothels last year and it was so much fun.
Here?
Yeah, yeah,
oh my God, I didn't know about this.
yeah.
So we need to hook up with her, definitely.
She's really like enthused and excited about it. She works at the Argo.
I think there's other National Park Service grant programs specifically oriented to women and minorities. So that may be another possibility to look into. As a possible source,
Mhm.
if it's oriented towards either women or minority groups.
Right. And that's so, Lisa, there's also a gal that has written 3 books.
JVL Bell, who will
Yeah.
not answer her. If she hears this, answer your emails, girl. I'm trying to get her into the library for our March meeting because she wrote the what hat? It's not the flappy hat. It's the crap. Hold on.
But she wrote 3 books and they're centered in Idaho Springs.
Well,
and
the one
around
is, and the
area.
other the other
They're-
2 are around this area.
Right, but they're really good books.
Lucky Hat, that's what it is. The Lucky
Okay.
Hat Mom.
Yeah.
It's actually very well. It's really good.
Yeah.
She's a good writer.
you guys have a couple other storytelling opportunities potentially. One is, Bob Bullen used to do a city council history lesson at the end of council every time. And Scott Pennell's kind of taken up the mantle of that. But I'm sure that Bob would love to work with people. He loves talking to
I need
it's
to
nothing
come
else.
We just had it.
About stories and stuff like that. And so that's something HPRC could do. The other thing is, I know the register call, Danny Tomlinson is the main guy keeping that alive right now. And he's wanting to tell local stories because the current has been more broad in its scope and he wants to have a smaller scope than they do. So he might be a really good person to reach out to too, and you could start.
He's
talking about-
amazing, actually, if you haven't talked to him. Like
Yeah.
I do the Mason cemetery cleanups because they own Alvarado and they own one up in Central City, which is phenomenal. He is a font of information.
Mhm.
have you guys ever thought about doing like podcasts? Because I feel like that would be a really good way to like get that information out there and like
Old
having
people,
more
young
people.
people.
Well,
No, that's
and then that's what
excellent.
people listen to now, you know, like, I mean,
Yeah,
I'll
they're
read
huge.
books, but most kids my age, like if you were like, oh, there's this great book about the history, they'd be like, yeah, I'm not reading that. But if you're like, there's a podcast
It's
where we
more
all have been
appeal.
talking, you know,
True.
and that's something that like all these people you're talking about can do individually, but you can collect it in like one place. You have all of that.
Excellent idea. Are you a podcaster?
I am not, but I know that they're super popular.
I
It's
have-
all anyone can talk
We
about.
have all the gear to do it. We have fancy mics that we could actually use for it. So
So, you
That's why I'm
know,
not a podcaster. That's
Yeah.
expensive.
well, actually, it is expensive. That's a great idea. Like, and that's a great way to get these people in. I love that.
it sounds to me like, I'm just gonna kind of summarize because I'm writing notes about direction here. But it sounds to me like what you guys have talked about kind of fit into 3 categories. One is the survey and the storytelling kind of piece, which we probably need funding for.
Yes.
One is kind of the community engagement piece, which is re-engaging the community in history, which I think the other thing that's really interesting about that is in the survey plan. And I think there's a lot of extenuating circumstances for why, but you didn't see local person engagement in that survey plan. And I think it was mostly because of COVID, like,
Mhm.
you know,
No
just
one
to
they talked
be,
to was local. They
Yeah.
did admit that, like, oh, they're all tourists.
Yeah, and I
There's a
think-
lot of windshield tours in
Yeah.
that.
and they're important too, because they come here for a reason too, but I think like if we found a way to engage people in a meaningful way with podcasts or whatever it is, like I think that would be really useful for a lot of people. And then the third leg of this is just looking at the organization and the guidelines and the standards and just seeing what we want to be in 20 years that is probably different than what we are today. So would you guys feel like those are 3 goals that we can maybe start moving towards? And then-
Thank you for bringing that together because I feel like there are so many.
Branch out ideas,
Yeah.
and he's like, so 3 things.
We could put like partnerships in there and technology and all the different. I could draft a little plan. I also have we had a report that we wrote a couple of years ago. I was thinking, because we do have some new members and we could kind of go through what these different surveys look like and what they involve, and like just kind of like what the requirements are to stay a CLG. And all these different things. CLG is a certified local government. And then I would like, honestly, I would love to go out with you guys and show you the history of the city that I've been working on, that I love like so much. This train especially, I love that train like it's a kid. So
It is his kid.
Yeah.
It is his kid.
but I think that would be a really fun thing. We have another group that's called the Historic Sites and Facilities Committee. And they typically are tasked with maintaining the
They
properties
need to
owned by
come
the city.
into us.
Yeah, there's really great people. So one of the people on that is Lou Howard. I don't know if you guys know her,
Mhm.
but she's been taking care of the cemetery pretty much single-handedly for the last 742 years. She's a wonderful person and she's,
But isn't that her passion?
Oh,
Like,
she
that-
is, yeah.
That's her, like, that's where she needs to be.
but she can tell you stories about that cemetery, like the people from the Titanic that are buried there or memorialized there. And there's like a bunch of really cool stuff. And where the cemetery used to be, which is off 7th,
Yes,
Um,
it's not there anymore,
right? So
where the mortuary was.
there's a lot of people who have been kind of holding down the fort for a really long time on history in Idaho Springs, and they're all wonderful people. And I think you guys connecting with them and building relationships would really benefit both organizations. Because all the people on sites and facilities are, they're very dedicated to the task. And I think we've been talking about how can you improve Hprc sites and facilities coordination, because that train, you guys, that's going to affect grant funding for this group too. When we go for the grant for that, it's going to be, that's going to be our shot that year. So I think it would be good to coordinate some of those efforts, which we can do. And then, as we move forward, the training piece too, I think you guys all that did go enjoy Saving Places, and there's other opportunities that we can participate in. But I just, history in Idaho Springs, there's so many pieces of it. I mean, it's one of the very first electrified cities in the country. Some of, Nikola Tesla and Edison both lived here. Lots and lots of presidents have been here. There's
I must know
history
if Doc
everywhere.
Holliday really came
Yeah,
here.
there's Union history
To
here.
the Club Hotel, right? That's
Yeah.
what we go into.
The battle that started like no child labor and in 40-hour work week started in Idaho Springs. There's a bombing here that led to the Ludlow massacre. There's a lot of history that's not told in Idaho Springs. And I'm glad that you guys are doing this work because it's really important.
Well, I feel like, when I was, when we were there, and then I'll stop, because I could just keep going. We need like an all-day retreat, Jonathan. We'll do a field trip and lunch and dinner and a whole day. But we do like 8 COAs a year. Right now, the Club Hotel is like 3 of them.
And the library is most of the rest.
Yeah, the library's the rest of them.
Well, there was a host.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But we don't have a lot because we have such a small district. And I was talking to other people who are doing like a town of 400 people. They do 25 a year. Boulder does like 200 plus a year. And I was like, okay, if we're not going to be doing COAs, what else can we be doing? And you guys may be like, shut up, Lisa. But I feel like there's so much, what Jonathan was saying, like there are other options for what we can do as far as history preservation.
Need to build history nerds, and then they're going to care more about COAs too.
Well, that's why I'm here, because
Yeah.
I kept talking to people in town, and they kept telling me all these cool things about the history of like Idaho Springs, and I'm like, none of this is anywhere. Like, this random person just told me something, and I'm like, that's so cool. Like, have you written a book about it? And they're like, no, I just tell people whenever they'll listen, and like, that's it. And I'm like, that's so sad. Like,
And see, that's like when I look at like
People
Lou,
record it.
well, like when I look
That's
at Louis,
Something happens.
how do
to
we
them.
get like, Lou's Tales of the Cemetery and create a book that is an Idaho Springs book? I'm an author. This creating the book part of it is the easy part.
You got Bob Mullen too, is the same.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history that we still have access to, which is pretty neat.
Chuck told me that somebody,
Chi Bell.
Chi Bell did cassette tapes in the 80s of somebody that passed away in the 80s. And I was like, well, where are those cassette tapes?
Historic Society has that.
I was like, we need to get those and put them into like something that's a little more.
Cassettes do not last very
Digitized
long.
and
Yeah.
then you could allow people to listen to it.
Yeah, cassettes don't last very long either. Like if you've ever like had an old cassette from when you were a kid and put it in a player, it's like, oh.
Lasts longer
I
than
just found
CDs.
a bunch of ballots from 1905.
I have.
Did you really?
Election, yeah, and we have our old court ledgers, we have bunches of, we have the original city charter, from like 1860, signed by President Grant, not
It needs
1860.
to be like a copy of the Historic Society.
But this is where
So-
there's documentation that needs to be cared for. We have all our old sandboard maps, which are these maps, which are
So
fire maps,
awesome.
and we just have a lot of things that there's a lot of things that could happen in historic preservation. So I think honestly, this thing with the Historical Society, the better, closer tie, it's a really cool idea.
Can we
Yeah.
maybe invite them to like, oh, can we go to their meeting or can we invite them to our meeting and see where, like, I don't want to like, one of the things that I want, and Patty told me you have this, I want to have a pictorial history of our National Register buildings so that when people come to us and they say, what did the building look like?
I was thinking about putting that in GIS. 'Cause you can put that
You know,
associated
Yeah,
pictures with
and
the
you have
address.
that.
You could put it in an Excel file and link it to GIS.
I would like
Yeah,
to
hyperlinks.
because,
Click on a hyperlink and. boom, there
You do
go.
GIS too, right?
I do,
Okay.
yes, I do for a living. Mhm.
Because I was originally thinking we could make a story map, but I was also thinking we could just start collecting pictures for each address.
Yeah.
And just filing them, so we have them, because like, a lot of times the COA.
how many
you need those
boxes do you
pictures to
guys
see
have?
What, what it looked like or whatever, did it have an awning or something like that?
Yeah, that, a story map would lend itself well, I think.
Yeah,
But did you hear Patty just said that she has billions of boxes of pictures that people have just said, hey, hi, Historical Society. So that comes into, people need community service to graduate high school. We need interns and labor for this kind of like cataloging and filing.
So there are people that are working on cataloging a lot of that stuff.
Who is-
One of them being Bob Bolin. What's the other guy's name? Who is also a plethora of stuff. In fact, Jen and I were talking about putting a secret microphone when
I
they
told
get
you what I want
together.
to do, so.
And like when they sit down in the chair, it activates the microphone. Of course, there's a lot of BS that goes on there too, but you know, you can filter that
You wanna
out.
catch that.
Where
That's
do
good
you go
stuff.
to
Some
school?
of the BS.
I'm at
too.
DU.
Do you? So like at DU, if there's an archaeology program,
Yeah, I'm
Or-
actually really close with the humanities department and the history department, which is overlapping with the archaeology, because there aren't a lot of people in the archaeology department, so they kind of intermerge. But they're great. And then like when I was at Saving Places, I met a student from Denver Metro, I believe.
they have a good
So-
archaeology department.
Yeah, well, and there's all these schools and like all these kids, and once you start digitizing stuff, like we do research projects, right, just for our classes, but if I don't have, like, if I can't go on my computer and find information about Idaho Springs, my professor's like, well, there's not enough there, you can't, like, and a 10-week class, there's not enough time, you know, that's the problem, is like, I have 10 weeks to write this paper, so once you start digitizing stuff, though, I guess my point is that then you end up getting like all these students, hopefully, I mean, you'd also have to like kind of advertise it, right? Like if you guys come in and talk to classes and be like, hey, maybe do some research on Idaho Springs and like all the information's right here, here's where you find it, like, then you kind of get some
Can
free
we build
labor
an
there.
internship too? Like,
You
could
could
we
do
do
that.
senior
Could
projects,
we,
like.
like,
Exactly, yeah, if you have it
What
there.
you
and
need to
you're
do is sort of
talking
like,
Right.
you do that like 5 months in advance, because probably right now, most of the faculty know what they're gonna be doing in the fall.
oh no, but also just like, can we do something with the city that helps students with their,
That's part of our plan, is more interns. We have one coming, the best and brightest person, that'll be here in June. And so we'll have that person coming. And then we've talked about other interns as well, but we've also talked about, we just need to make a, like you said, we have to make a scope of service and get all this stuff together to make it good and useful for the person doing the work.
But one place I worked, we actually had a team from CU that actually did the parks, trail and open space plan for the town.
that's really cool. But I love the idea if we could get somebody that's in the archaeology or Colorado history, that would do like, I love that idea of the Colorado Southern Railroad.
Yeah, that's a great.
That is a fantastic idea. And there's a guy actually right now at History Colorado that is creating an app that deals with, that covers African-American history throughout the state of Colorado. Did you hear him speak? That guy was amazing, and he's done it in a year. Like, yeah, he's been here a year and he's built this app.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of, can we bring in colleges again, because we have such a unique history. Like if I'm a history major or whatever, like this is like, you know, the candy bowl.
Yeah, well, I'd be happy to like get you guys some connections with you, even if it's just to help you figure out like what you would need for them to recognize that as a program and advertise it.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll talk to my professor tomorrow and then I'm sure she can help me find people.
And also, because I know my kiddo goes to Metro, and he's in linguistics,
Yeah.
but which would be good for like the Ute and the Arapaho, because they're the Mountain Ute they have less than 50 speakers left of their particular dialect. But there's an active archaeology department there. And I know like CU and is it Denver Community College and Metro all work together on that
Same
campus.
You
Well,
just
it's-
do excavations too.
It's a shared campus, they don't necessarily get along with each other.
There might be a little rivalry. Okay, what other ideas, guys? Because we could go on, like I said, I love the idea. Can we maybe look at like setting up what works for all of us?
Sure.
for a field trip day, even if it's just a half day lunch field trip. Like, I'll drive. I can fit 4.
Well, if it's nice out, we can put all of us in the back of my truck.
There we go.
Just roll through town like
Great
zip
plan.
line tours.
I would, what I think we could do, what might be effective is if I could send out some information, that would have to be a meeting. So we'd have to notice it because we'd all be there,
Yeah.
but that's not very challenging. We can do that. And I want to work with your schedule, like how it works for you and everything. So I want to make sure we have all of us on the same page. But we can do that. And then I was thinking that what I'd like to do is have another work session, and we may have to combine it with a regular meeting if we have to have a hearing for Mr. Hearn.
Yeah.
And there may be, I'm not 100% sure if there's another COA coming, but there may possibly be one that might come up. So we may have a little bit of going on in the spring, which would be a good thing. But regardless, what I was gonna say is we had a work session, these kind of priorities we identified tonight. I could bring a work, like a draft of a staff report to you guys and kind of show you what we talked about and kind of organize it into what could be the beginnings of a plan. And if that would work for you guys, and I'd also like to bring you the work we have about the work of HPRC essentially. So we could bring maybe an initial review of I don't know exactly what we'd include, but at least like what surveys look like and what typical activities look like and what we might need to do to like private activity bonds or whatever. So I can bring that information to you. Maybe not all at the same time, depending on how big it is, but we could do like a meeting and another meeting.
It's
and then-
fine.
Yeah, if we got like June or July, we could probably have what we need.
Well, let's also have a little bit of a focus about how we're gonna like maybe help do something for what do we want to do for the borough races? How about Patty, if we want to do
Let us
anything?
know
where
to be, let's say.
Coloring
so many
contest. We need to put a coloring contest together.
I love
Coloring
people.
contest.
That has people.
Well, and see, that would be a really cool thing too, is, you know, not only would we be able to use volunteers and we could actually maybe like get shirts that say historic, or, you know, HPRC
High
asked us
school
about.
badges. High school needs volunteer hours. I know my kid does.
But, you know,
Love
just
it.
having us out and about, because we do get a lot of people. And I think this year we're thinking about also, I don't know if you guys were here before, remember, but we blocked off with I don't know, we made a pen out of the street across from the park. And when the runners were done, they were able to put their burros in there and then go back and watch their friends, so they didn't have to have their burro there with them. But that would be a cool place to have helpers, and also just to have people wandering around, and, you know, even if we could dress in period, well, I'm not going to because I have my pink vest for running. But period costumes and just, you know, history of Idaho Springs while we have a captive audience, and it's a huge captive audience because you only have one racer in his burro, their family is here, running around and spending money. And
Have you guys seen the borough races? I used to watch them when I lived on you.
They run right to the corner, like near my house.
They ran right past my old house. I
Finish
love
line
watching
is,
the
they always
boroughs.
get scared of the tape, that's the finish line, so someone will stop like right before the finish line, they're trying to like push them over.
Oh, they do,
into the
they're
line.
like pushing and pulling.
it's
And then people were passing them off when they were way ahead of them the entire time, because the bro's like, I'm not stepping over that line.
Oh, no, they're hilarious. They're
They're so
hilarious.
cute. They're so cute.
After doing the mule ride, I can see exactly why the boroughs are the way they are, because the mules are similar, the mules are of the same bloodlines. But I would love to, like, what can we do for May? So we definitely have the borough races, Taste of Idaho Springs.
I would just caution you guys that if you're all in a quorum, then it needs to be a noticed meeting unless it's like a kind of you met at the grocery store just happened to meet at the grocery store, that's kind of a different situation. But it's really important to remember that you are an official body of the city. And when you make a decision in a hearing, that's a judicial decision that basically has 5th and 14th Amendment implications. So it's really important that we make sure that when you do meet, that it's just noticed, that people know you're meeting and it's a public meeting. But that being said, in events and things like that, there is some latitude. So
I was gonna say, there has to be some
Yeah.
latitude with event
Well, at least
planning.
more.
I would recommend that one way that we could handle it, and we could talk about this with Andy too, because I think he needs to weigh in on this, but there may be some opportunities just to look at the planning piece, like how, because we probably need to get that piece going. Sadie just is out of town, but you know, I have access, have the same Chamber of Commerce stuff that she has, so we can kind of work on that, and that could be a conversation with me. And an email, like, you know, as long as you guys don't reply all, I can converse with you as well, so.
Never reply all, always reply to Jonathan
Yeah.
or Wonder.
And it's not quite to the same level that happens at city council, like it's a little different there, but I just want to make sure that we remember what we're doing here on that piece of it. I'm saying this in a way that's more careful than, we just need to make sure that we're careful is all I'm saying. So on the May thing, we have those events are kind of marked out for what we could do. It sounds like the coloring thing, that may not really be an event so much as a campaign. So
Yes, but go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was saying is that it'd be also worthwhile to sort of look at this as a year-long thing. In other words, what do we want to get accomplished over the course of the year? Because we can't all do everything in 2 or 3 months, and so how do we spread things out?
Well, I agree with you, but I also think, I was looking online, some of the Colorado, support web, like the Colorado.com and the tourism website, they really support who's doing what during preservation month.
Yeah,
and
it's an important month to try and tie to.
So I'm like, can we have maybe two events that we do that are tied to us? Like, can we talk to, I bet you Mary Jane, I don't know, Mary Jane would be willing to work with us and do gold painting. How do we bring some gold painting stuff?
she's bringing it on April 1st, so that's probably something that they could do.
Okay,
I would recommend, what if we pick 2 of us, if 2 of you wanted to do it, just to start the conversation about what that event would include, and then if that's acceptable to the group, then maybe if we need to have a special meeting about it, just to discuss plans. But if that was what you guys wanted to do, and just gotta get a event planned, I don't see, or what do you think, Mike?
Well, I just think in terms of an easy to probably put together event is what you were talking about for the board of giving a tour, would be to do a tour thing in conjunction with in May, in terms of taking people to the different sites.
yes.
And you sort of schedule times at which someone will be there,
Right,
over like an itinerary over the
I
course
like
of the
that.
day.
that would be very easy.
Another thing you can do is utilize the museum over here as a meeting
Oh, the
place.
Underhill Museum?
Yeah, because that's the historic societies. And there's also, if you don't know, a beautiful garden back there that we do luncheons at and teas. We could plan an event there. It's a must. Huh?
Where's their museum?
There's a
on-
museum right on the
on-
corner.
But also,
Across
It's
from
called
Tommy
the
Knockers.
Underhill House.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's project support
Yeah.
and there's right beside it.
Mike, I love this idea,
And then
like,
it's like $2.
we do tours over a Saturday and Sunday. There are 4 locations, sign up for the tour.
Because even if you don't go inside the Argo, still someone on the outside, on the street, basically saying, here's what's significant about the Argo.
But even if we said, okay, somebody from this group or the Historical Society starts you off and then hands you off to the Argo, is it the Argo tour?
It's basically the model they're using for the gold rush or the gold nugget hunt. If we coordinated with a couple of places, and this is why I think a smaller group might be able to do this, if we had a couple of resources, pick a smaller number and just say, hey, we want to bring people to your business just for our initial thing. I did a thing recently, I went to St. Thomas, and they have this pirate thing that you can do, and it's like, what's the show where you go traveling around the world? It's a amazing race kind of deal. And so you go to each business and then they talk to you about the thing or whatever, like the Carnation Alley or whatever it is. And they might be willing to do something like that because it brings business to them. And this is something Chamber could partner with us as well on.
It's like a
And
stamping.
the location could even be like the hotel
It could
to
be
show
a
a project.
passport.
It's
Like
like
a stamping
construction.
at each
Yeah.
place,
Yeah.
yeah, passport, yeah.
Yeah, we've done that stuff before. Usually for a small business Saturday, we had, the chamber did this, was we had a half a sheet of paper and we had all the businesses on there. And you didn't have to go and buy anything, but you had to go in and actually talk to them in order to get your stamp. And then if you got all of your stamps, then you were entered in for a drawing. It's like $100 gift certificate or something.
That's cool. They did something like that in Milwaukee where I grew up, and I only know because I was walking around on the street and some girl ran up to me and she was like, "Did you grow up in Milwaukee?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "I'm doing a scavenger hunt and I need to find a local person and ask them a question about the city." And then she asked me something. And I did. That was fun.
Okay, so wait, that is fantastic. During that month, do we give local buttons, ask a local? Okay, because that way you don't get harassed if you were not wishing to be harassed.
I guess, yeah.
But
Can I make a suggestion?
yes,
So we're almost at 8:00.
oh God,
What
sorry.
if we would do this meeting, we would do this in May. So that means that we would have a full month to discuss this if we talk about it in our March meeting. And that would give me time to kind of put all the pieces together about how this could work and making sure that we respect the legal requirements that we need to respect. I could bring this back to the group and we could say that we'd go ahead and schedule that March meeting for a work session either way. And then we can have some concrete
Definitely.
decision points to make if that would work for you guys.
Mhm.
I wear a mask, I mean, I would always wear a mask a local, but
I know some things here and there. Haven't been here long, but it's a picture of it.
okay, so any other, sorry, I know we're getting very, like,
I just want to make sure we're, I wanted to bring it around again.
no, we're following in the weeds and down the rabbit hole. Okay, if there's nothing else, then I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 7:49. And with plans that we will have a March meeting, at least a work session, perhaps COA, but don't happen.
I will work with Wonder on an agenda and I'm gonna try to, I've got kind of the direction you guys gave me. So I'm gonna try to get to like a.
Sort of, like this.
I'm gonna build a couple staff reports for you just to review, and then the first one would be the goals, and we just kind of be
Yeah.
draft there, just make sure it's aligned with what you guys want. I'd be figuring out this special events kind of thing, what we might be able to do for May, and then I think that was. Is there anything else? That was it, right?
No.
Okay, and if we have a COA, then you'll see the paperwork for that.
Okay.
Great. Thank you all. This was a very productive meeting. No, HPRC is really fun, and we have not done the fun bits of it for a while.
No,
So
we've not done, I've been on it, you've been on it for a lot longer than me. We haven't done the fun bits, but this is the fun bits to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rather than like, telling some homeowner, no, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
What are you studying?
I'm studying political science, philosophy,
So you're
and
all in
business
the circle study. I
ethics.
sent an email to someone,
but
I
I'm
think Mary
graduating
Tracy trying to
in
join,
June
and I
with law
know
school.
before installation. That's what happened.
Oh, well, so we're
Right
gonna
here,
have
I'm
a
gonna
shower and I got all that stuff right here.
Hey,
And
I
then,
love
I was
watching.
like, trying to see where you are, and I like
Where
ran
did how'd
here,
you
like,
get here?
I work here.
I don't know, I admire it. I take a lot of
The,
story.
my previous.
So I can send you. I usually do, I just enjoy and anybody's work, lots of money. I know I'm gonna run over there, we have that, member.
Two architects on this committee, they both-
And
they're-
for executive.
They both resigned at the same time, so.
Well,
they're
I-
not picked through
They
the
kind
school
of
district. But they're fantastic.
I know, I've been very like.
Certain professionals.
Yeah.
Type of
So
board.
sad.
That's what I was.
That's how they tend to go.
Enjoy
Join
it.
Yeah.
It's the Historic Society. and-
There's so
So we need to go on worker bees.
Go eat, my friend.
Awesome.
So this
Nice
stage
meeting
is
you. Very nice
a
to meet you
little
too.
more trying to push the local boards to.
Do you feel okay about meeting, Lisa?
That's
I feel great about
awesome. Yeah, I think my biggest regret was.
I'll put all that stuff together. Some of it I already
I've
have
taken a
written, so
lot
it
of
won't be
history
too bad.
classes and I find it
Well,
so
I love the
interesting.
idea, I would totally do this, because I love the.
So right now I'm
I went
doing
to
my,
a
it's called a capstone,
1672
so
Ferry
the smaller
House.
courses
And
kind
it's
of,
very crossing in
but
Southern
it's in
Ireland.
political
Bye.
science.
Be safe tomorrow.
Milwaukee has a very interesting
And
political
We
history.
took the Walton House.
Has
Did you ever
been-
read the old story
it's
of the
had
top when
one
they're
of
playing
socialist
cards and they're
cities in the
playing for
country,
fish?
so-
Yeah,
You know what those are?
yeah, I've done.
They're
some
small little
research
mother
on it.
pearl fish.
My,
and they were
my
used as
capstone is
poker
actually
chips
gonna
when you
focus
play
on
for
Florida.
cards.
That's super cool.
And
I
they
ended up
had
doing
them, they
something on
found them there.
prisons because I had
Wow,
something
where was
really
that?
It was in Maryland, it was
conservative
south,
I
it
just
was
kind
like
that route. but
Shady
it's
Side,
interesting.
down the Shady Side, and
Yeah.
it was a
I'm still-
ferry
I'm still
house.
enjoying it.
And it was like, they had one of the, like,
Maybe
a
you would know
huge
about this. I
license
feel
that
like
gave them the
there's-
whole
so Jared,
river
you
and
know about
the
that,
size.
there were certain
Good night,
things
Stephanie,
he
thank
was
you
gonna
for all
give
that,
me
my friend.
in-depth stuff so that I had some background about what was going on.
And I loved it, like, I loved giving
And
tours,
that never
and
happened
I'm
to
always
me back.
all, I'm down to
You
dress
just
up.
want to know
Have you
more
been to
about
Format House?
what the
I've
board
not.
is and how. it
That's like
operates
the
and-
end of
I guess
the
I
trail
don't
in
know,
Colorado.
I don't know what he was gonna give
And
me,
it's
but
like
I
a
know
working
that,
farm,
like,
but it's like
when you guys talk
1800s
about the
farm.
survey.
But they have books like,
I haven't seen that yet.
I know where, we've gotten to see our.
All that
campus,
stuff
see
is
local
digital,
Colorado
so
and
it's
stuff.
easy to send.
But the kids
so
love it because it's got
You
like
probably don't have a business.
a blacksmith shop and like all that.
But,
stuff. It's really cool.
Sort of put down
But I
your-
think if we could do that
Maybe
kind of
my
tour where you have
email or
visits
Yeah.
everywhere that you go, like,
Put down
if
your
we do
information
that
out.
regularly,
I
two
can-
weekends.
I would
something
really
like that.
appreciate that, thank you so
That'd be cool.
much.
You know, we can pay people.
It probably.
We
would
wanted
have
to do that
have
right before
tabs
COVID.
or
And
one of the other
this
things
club,
that's
you know
available
Genevieve
in the
Fuller?
state.
Which is.
There is a
She used to be
website where they
the
have all the
director of
old
the historical
newspapers.
society, but we wanted
Yes,
to
I've actually
create
been on
basically
that.
that.
I've been using that, just.
This is like,
We had to do
was
some
20
other
bucks,
research
and the
to
only thing
practice.
that's different about it than the real
Yeah,
one is it doesn't
that
turn
was
off.
very interesting.
So you have to be careful about that, but I really like this.
I
That's
feel
the
like
thing.
that's
Yeah.
something in general that is just.
But
cool to look
we were
into.
gonna
I wish
do
I had
like,
done that
basically,
throughout college, like
there's
there's
a
so
lot of
much
fire history here too,
just
that's really
information
important.
out there.
Like
that
the
no
first
one
fire
likes through,
program.
you know.
Or some, I don't know, the bunch of stuff. So we were gonna do it at the
Yes.
West End Host House.
Thank
kind of like
you
a
so
fire
much, yeah, just
garden
anything
there,
that you think, I don't know,
a fireman
any
talk
big
and
things
all
that are
that.
going
But
on
I
right
think the
now,
ones
I'm
like
happy to
West
read
End
stuff,
actually
I
have
just
the
don't
little fire carts
have
in
the
there.
stuff to
We do.
read yet.
That we still wanna
Well,
do that, but we
because
had to
there's a-
talk
there's a
about
whole lot of
like
stuff.
living
What is
history
it
piece of it.
You're most
So,
Well, I
interested
think
in.
if we can do living history, like, I'll
Gosh,
show you
so I
the
read
pictures
the
there.
like,
I agree.
And I
like
I'm fine with
guidelines
this being
Okay.
a
for the
passion
HPRC.
project and it's a 5-year project.
So whatever's in there, I already
And
read,
we just
and
strongly
I have that
recommend
document, so I can reread it.
when we get a.
I guess just like-
There's the
planner
one
that we don't
chapter
go
on
away.
historic
Yeah.
preservation.
I like it.
municipal codes. It's a
For
short
sure. Yeah.
chapter, but it
One of the
includes
first
a
things-
section that says,
This is one of the first things I got to do.
this is what we've asked you as
It's
a
one of the
committee.
things
Okay,
this is
so
one of
I'll
the
make
reasons I
sure I
came
do
to
that.
Iowa
for sure.
Springs
Is that the
because
chapter 24 one that you
I
read?
think it's
Colorado
chapter
still,
24.
to me,
Okay, all right, I'll
like it
check
that
on that.
that's
I
true.
put a little note in my notes.
I need to go
So-
through and see your hoard.
Let's see,
Stuff?
yeah, I'll think about what
Yes.
else,
I got a lot.
do you want something
I know
specific
you
on
do.
historic preservation?
I was
It's a huge
well, you were
list.
right there. I guess you heard me say that.
Yeah, I
That
think
was
that would
a
help.
combination.
Yeah.
Did you know we had those?
Um,
I did not.
You know those
a lot
big wooden
of-
boxes downstairs?
we had a basement.
How
Oh,
interested
God.
are you in
I mean,
buildings?
underneath
Most
or
of-
downstairs?
Oh, no,
most
no,
of
no.
historic
That's
preservation
actually
is
this
on
building.
buildings.
Okay, I mean,
Robert's building.
anything
But
that's
in our case,
relevant to
we
this,
have
I
those
wanna
big
know,
wooden
because I
boxes
wanna be
downstairs.
beneficial.
There's ballot
Yeah,
boxes in there, like
obviously.
super fancy ones.
Okay,
And they have
let me
ballots.
think about,
No,
I have
yeah.
evening norms.
We have all those books that we had
That's
downstairs that we
awesome.
just moved up,
So,
the old court records and
um,
everything.
Well, there's a bunch
Let me
of
think about
records
what
in
would be the
there.
most useful things.
I would appreciate
What
that,
are the most
yeah.
useful things
Have you ever seen inside that room?
today,
Sure, really fast.
to be knowing about it?
And you'll
Yeah.
understand.
It's a big field, it's actually.
The Oregon
a lot of
City Hall
change.
is very
It's what's
significant.
happening in historic preservation.
Okay,
One of the big changes that's occurring is there's a lot of discussion now more at the national level about sort of a reorientation because the
Question is, how do we
history
not have
from
this stuff like the-
1966 when
grant
the
to
act was
protect this
passed.
stuff and
till
put it in
now
the
has been on
buildings so that
buildings.
people can see it?
And there's now a lot of discussion about
So that does,
preserving
there's another
cultural
grant that will give us another grant. for it.
that, okay, so that's kind of
Beyond
like
just cities.
like Denver has its first cultural district.
okay,
And that's basically, I think it's in the Chicago part of town, or is it Indiana? I forget which one.
okay.
But that's part of a big national discussion in historic preservation about, is that a direction that it should go? Because how historic preservation got set up in the 20th century was basically architects and museum curators. They're the ones who set the direction of what historic
Do
preservation
you think
was.
that's why it sent through so much on like how a building looks instead of like what it?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
and that's kind of the debate occurring at the national level about, does there need to be some sort of change or widening of what we're looking at?
Yeah,
And so, and I think there was a session on this at the conference, I didn't, but they're basically saying, even if the building has no historic significance, but if significant historic events took place there.
that's what
Now
the
you-
keynote speaker on Wednesday
Yeah.
talked about too. Yeah.
Now, you could do that anyway, actually, under the existing.
Okay,
However, the whole emphasis, and again, it's because of the origin, it was architects and curators.
right,
Started the whole thing, so it was their focus.
right.
See, it was what was called first the Athens Charter in the 30s, and then there was the Rome Charter, not Rome Charter, the Venice Charter in 1964.
Okay.
Our Preservation Act in this country came 2 years after the Venice Charter.
Interesting.
But Venice is sort of where, at an international level, where the rules of historic preservation were sort of set out. America went in a slightly different direction, but there's a lot of overlap between the two. But that's sort of like the history of preservation. So
That's
it's
interesting.
just one thing to sort of mention in terms of where historic preservation got started.
Yeah.
You could sort of say there was a Team America and a Team Europe. And Team Europe run the race in terms of who invented historic preservation. In this country, it was the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, who actually owned Mount Vernon.
Oh,
Still,
okay,
that was the first building that was specifically targeted to be restored.
really?
They came in about a year after an architect in France.
It's fabulous.
Duloc, I can't remember his name now.
But I found it in.
But anyway,
those-
I don't know if you
those
remember the
four
Notre Dame
rows.
fire.
Yes,
Do you remember there was a very tall spire at the very center of the building?
kind of,
He added that, the building was built in the 12th or 13th century.
right.
In the 19th century, he said, I'd like to put a spire on top of the building. That's where the spire came from.
So it was just kind of random.
But his idea about historic preservation was, we should improve the old buildings. In other words, we could make them better.
Sure.
And if you know who Ruskin was, the
Yes,
author,
they
Sounds
do.
familiar.
his one, he said, we shouldn't preserve them at all, we should let them decay. And then sort of the ruins is what is what we should allow to happen. And so historic preservation wound up, those were the two extremes, the preservation wound up being in the middle.
Okay,
That's kind of where it came from.
That's interesting. That's good to know. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, and anything you want to send me, like, I'm happy to read stuff. That's why I'm here. I'm here more to learn than anything, you know, so I'm happy to just.
So you got probably 3 years of law school.
I do, yep, yeah, so next year.
It'll be done.
Do you have any area law?
I think I'm gonna go into business law just because I don't think I'm gonna like.
My
litigate,
kid is ready to.
But that's what I was trying my first year. I love the contracts.
So they're
I
writing
love
grant
reading
for
things, so
$10,000.
that's
to
why
get
I
the
think
equipment
contract
that they
would make
need.
sense
What does
for
it
me.
do?
Did you ever see the paper
Tomorrow?
chase?
No, what is
Movie?
I was
that?
like, you want some
No,
help?
what's it about?
It's about law school.
Oh, okay. I
It's
just watched it.
it's a drama.
You know what?
Okay.
Talk
About
to
law
him and I'll
schools.
email you tonight.
Okay.
This is the Harvard Law School.
Oh,
And so
sure.
it's just incredibly
They're trying to get better
brutal
food at the high school.
Right.
academic schedule.
Do they have
time to, like, where I can get the
Well, there was a time that was very famous.
Okay.
It's called the paper chase.
That'd be awesome.
Paper chase.
I would drive
Paper
it.
chase. Okay, I'll look it up. I've been really into, have you heard of John Grisham? Okay, I've been super into all of his novels.
As
and
long
stuff
as I gotta
recently.
be sure.
Paper chase is like, it's very
You know,
different
it's
because it's about law.
$10,000.
Sure, not about lawyers.
Right.
Okay,
He's
I'll
like,
have to
yes,
watch
we
it.
talked
That'd
about
be
a smoothie
interesting.
machine.
That's why I'm not going to, not that I would get in, but also why I like
I'm like,
Harvard.
it's not gonna be up to the students. It's like, no.
And from what I remember, a good part of the movie when they're in the classroom, they were talking about contracts.
Yeah, that like.
Yeah,
choice
okay,
between
there you
that
go.
and something else.
I think it's a
They chose-
perception of law. I think it's very overlooked. Like
let's,
every,
um,
like even this,
let's
like
see if we can
contracts,
get
you
better
know,
food.
like.
That's
Yeah,
a great
there
life
is a
skill,
lot
too.
of what cities deal with where actually are contracts.
Oh, I told you.
And
That's a good
the
life too.
COA.
I told him, I was like, the guy that.
It
lives
is,
in the
okay,
city, like,
there
he
you
can't
go.
leave.
What-
You know,
what
I'll
is
throw my
COA?
body.
Certificate of
before you try to trust me.
Okay.
Somebody has to come here to get the town's permission to
Yeah, so
do stuff to
Dale
work
is,
with you.
but Dale is the number,
And
Dale is the
this
legal.
Committee's
That's
job is
awesome.
to see,
Yeah, I was
well,
like, how much is
anything
it
they're
for? I'm
doing to
thinking
it
like
doesn't
$8.
change its historic
Like,
value.
That's what the
Yeah.
guidelines mostly
Yeah.
went over.
I
So
was
when
like,
the COAs,
well,
we
shit.
get. once
Well, if
it's
we
set,
have
that
time,
that's
if it
okay.
does,
Yeah.
we can
Got it.
probably try
So
to
do
do
that.
that. Yeah, I know I
I
can
think
at
I
least
should
get
do
these
these
in
next
chambers.
And I'll look
And
at
then the
the
city
chapter
obviously,
24
as
stuff.
long as it don't need council.
And I don't know if this fits in your area or not,
Yeah.
but also there are things
Oh
like,
my God, he would be delighted. But yeah, so I would love like, I love
It's sort
this,
of
I
like,
love this idea. that
it's sort of like
there's
the
actually
handbook of
living
someone
on
who's a
the
commissioner.
street.
Okay,
Because all these
I think
people
that
are
might be
gonna
what
die and we have
Jared
jobs.
was trying to get me to.
Okay, so when.
Because I don't know if they have one here, but I have
What is
one.
the next?
someplace.
Okay, well then maybe that would help. I really don't know what.
But it sort of explains sort of what are the rules.
Would you please?
A lot of
Because
it's sort of,
like, I would like to.
actually, that's
Send me
probably
an
very
email to
interesting
my,
for you would be,
Okay.
is to send you
Okay.
legal
And
stuff
just
on
say-
historic preservation.
Yeah, please do.
Because a lot of it's about how do
But yeah, I'll
legal,
ask the library.
keep themselves from
if they
getting
wanna be
into
part of the
legal
coloring
trouble.
contest.
Okay.
but I could send you several publications just on historic preservation and the law.
Yeah,
Because they're
send me
really
both.
good.
I'll look at them all. Thank you.
Oh.
I appreciate it. All right, I'll see you guys soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes, bye.
See you, Madison.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Madison.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Okay, staying busy.
Well, that's good. You guys are, where are you working right now? Mostly.
I got a bunch in Georgetown, Barb's in Costa Rica, so I've got like 4 different things I have to do.
Costa Rica for a long time, I think it's there.
They go there periodically.
Oh, okay.
They're doing an Spanish immersion
Rick
thing
is
for
a,
like 3 or 4 weeks.
Rick is a really good friend of mine. We've been friends for several years before he came to Georgetown, so he's a pretty good guy.
So you know him from Rush.
Yeah, we know each other from before, from like, when he was the assistant, I was assistant, we were in like all the different management associations together, so. And then when the Georgetown job opened, I told him he should apply for it, because I thought he'd be a good fit up there.
Yeah. Many years ago, I had a chance to join ICMA and I didn't do it.
Yeah. It's
But
like,
I forget why, but they sent me an application, right?
they
I-
changed the rules somewhat to make it easier.
I've been an assistant town manager
Yeah,
for about 4 years
where was that?
in Monument.
Okay,
I was also the planner. And it was a split position between being assistant town manager and planning director. And I had one place I worked where I was like over 3 departments.
I have to be honest with you, I've been doing that in the interim role for the planning thing, and everything's caught on fire like the second Jared left. Like, I've already had like 3 variance applications, which we don't have that many variance applications. So I ran variance board last week, and we're gonna have 2 more meetings that we're a special meeting for. And then Soda Creek Highlands came back and he wants to go for, to get moving on that project again. And then the Argo came back, and then you've got the 4 Points project that's doing all this new stuff.
Those last 3 are very big.
Well, yeah, and I was like, I knew I can do most of the things, but like a plan review, like a full-on plan review, I feel like we should probably get a planner to do the plan review. I mean, I looked at it, I know generally what I'm looking at, I just don't wanna miss something that's important.
I had mentioned to Andy on a volunteer or pro bono basis, I had said it's okay to call me.
Okay,
I don't know if that's the direction he wants to go.
I had talked about it, cause we got it turned into permits for the Port Woods project yesterday, and so they need to get their.
I'm gonna lock you guys in.
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
That by itself is a good project.
Yeah,
But, yes, that's.
you know, it's good, it's been good experience, and most of it, like, no problem, like, you know, just telling somebody what they can build or whatever, but. You know, when it gets to like a project of the scale of 4 points, it's like kind of a different story.
I like this better than pink.
You know, this building's haunted, for real.
We need to do a haunted Idaho Springs tour.
I hear them. They run, it's like kids or something, and they run around up there, and then when it
Are
gets
you
to be
sure
night,
it's not me?
no, it's not, Diane will tell you too, she's seen it too. And I don't think they're mean, but like they're running around,
But this is the old school building.
and then it gets to the point where I can't go in the bathroom when I'm here late at night by myself, because the mirror is there, and there's the thing about the mirror here, that's just not right,
Which one?
the one in the basement.
So we need to, so I would like to do the brothels and bordellos or the, what
Yeah, I
was it,
think
booze
Erin-
and bordellos, but also can we get together with her and do a haunted?
That'd be cool.
And like, let's make Idaho Springs Halloween Town this year.
Oh, we definitely are trying to do that.
Everybody's been trying to do
Yeah.
that since I've been up here.
It's getting there. The Minor Street thing on Halloween is getting better and better.
Yeah, that is.
In London, they have something called, it's a tour called Scandalous London.
So that's like booze and bordellos.
There's a really cool brothel in Russell Gulch,
It's also murder.
all the Jack the Ripper and things like that. Well, I will see you guys later.
Good night,
Thank you guys
Jonathan.
for coming.
Oh, you guys, good night, Jonathan.
Okay.
Bye, night.